Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. Madam Secretary, please proceed to call the roll.
Senator Lang.
Here.
Senator Wynn.
Here.
Senator Titus.
Here.
Senator Stone. Chair Donate.
And I am here. Thank you so much. Everyone's present. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have a few hearings on Senate Bill 286, 232, 119, 298, and a brief presentation from NCSL. Before we start, I would like to make a few housekeeping announcements. Agenda items may be taken in a different order as listed. Right now, we have a plan to proceed as I was listing them. We ask that any folks that have public comments today or testimony to please keep them to 2 minutes each. If you wish to testify, you can sign in at the table by the door. And if you do not testify, also please sign in on the door just so we can have a record of you. When testifying, please turn the microphone on to speak and off to listen. And just as a reminder that anyone who wishes to receive copies of the committee's exhibits should go to the Nevada Legislature's website. And finally, just as a preference, of course, please turn off your electronic devices, especially your cell phones and laptops. So we do have, we're going to start because we have our senator colleague here. So we're going to open up the hearing on Senate Bill 286. This bill revises provisions relating to healthcare. So we have Senator Don Daraloop. So welcome back.
Thank you so much, Chair Donate. It's such a pleasure to be here again. And for the record, I am Marilyn Dondero-Loop, representing Senate District 8 in Clark County, and I am pleased to present Senate Bill 286 on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. This measure seeks to bring more awareness about multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis, or MS, is defined by Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine as a long-lasting disease of the nervous system, an autoimmune disorder, if you will, that causes the body to attack itself, damaging the nerves. This condition disrupts the essential communication between the brain and the body. Affecting everyone in different ways, symptoms can range from blurred vision to losing the ability to communicate completely, and in severe cases, completely paralyze someone. The Cleveland Clinic of Nevada, the only national multiple sclerosis designated partner in Southern Nevada, asserts there are approximately 2,500 Nevadans that suffer from this condition. As many of us know, there are challenges with diagnosing this disease for multiple reasons, such as the vagueness of symptoms and the lack of specific tests used to identify the disease. Despite these challenges, it is proven that early diagnosis yields better results and reduced disability since it allows for early intervention. MS is diagnosed through a ruling out process in which two things must be true in order to have the disease. For an MS diagnosis, you must have two attacks at least 1 month apart and have more than one area of damage to the central nervous system, which is coating or layering of the nerve. This damage is often identified using an MRI or neurological exam. Current research shows the sooner you obtain that MS diagnosis, the sooner you can start therapy to reduce its effects. Disease-modifying therapies, or DMTs, are used to reduce the severity and the number of attacks one experiences. And DMTs have also shown to be effective in reducing long-term disability. David Humm, known as the original Las Vegas Raider, received a diagnosis after retiring from the National Football League. When considering treatment options in response, he opted out of receiving DMTs. That was until he noticed his sister Lori, who was also diagnosed with MS. Her treatment experience was different as she elected to receive those DMTs and responded well to the treatment. Unfortunately, David lost his battle with MS in 2018. If there was more information disseminated about MS, he could have been more aware of the benefits of DMTs long before Lori's diagnosis. You most likely heard me say that on the floor today, and also heard me reference Lisa Foster, our friend and longtime lobbyist. She was also diagnosed, and when she was told that she was 20 years into the disease. This delayed her treatment and subsequently has resulted her in now using a cane and a walker. Bringing more awareness and increasing access to the information on MS could ultimately save the lives of many Nevadans, and for this reason, I chose to sponsor this bill. I will now briefly go through the sections of the bill before I ask my co-presenters to come up and also offer some words. Section 1 of this bill amends existing law and requires the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services to maintain a website that provides information relating to MS and the resources available to those that are diagnosed. And in Section 2, I'm asking the governor to annually proclaim the third week of March to be Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week, calling upon the media, educators, healthcare providers, amongst others, to bring MS to the attention of Nevadans. I would now like to ask and introduce Tom Hum, brother of David Hum, and James Hum, nephew of David Hum, to tell you a little bit more about their story. And following them will be Reagan Comas, representing the Cleveland Clinic, with statistics on this disease. As you can see, we're wearing orange today in honor of MS Month. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I will step back and let the others come forward. Thank you.
Chair Dignate and members of the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, thank you for this opportunity to testify on the merits of SB 286. For the record, my name is James Hum, and normally I'm in these committee hearings on behalf of GoEd. But today I'm here as a private citizen and to assist Senator Dondero Loop with her presentation on this bill, as this bill does mean a great deal to my family. Unfortunately, MS has been a big part of our lives. In many cases, it has revolved around it. As I sit here with my father today, Tom, there honestly isn't a day I can remember that it didn't impact our lives. I still recall seeing my cousin Courtney when she was just 10 years old, pushing her dad in his wheelchair. Watching such a young person learn how to push and collapse a wheelchair and lift it unassisted in the back of a car was truly a sight to see. For the record, though, whenever I did see it, I did assist her, so we just need to know that. There's also my Aunt Lori, who many people don't know, also has been afflicted with this disease, also at too young of an age. She had to navigate the raising of young children while her body slowly betrayed her. Oftentimes, attending their school and sporting events and trying to tackle the bleachers with the use of a cane was no easy task. She continues to this day to fight this disease. And although Uncle David lost his battle, there are many others out there, like Lori, that continue their fight and struggle daily with what would seem to most of us in this room to be mundane tasks. I would like to transition, though. Since I've outlined these struggles, please know we have had several uplifting and incredibly positive experiences, too. My uncle has received many acknowledgments and accolades denoting his battle. My aunt has gotten the help, care, and medicine that she's needed when she's needed it. We have met incredible people like Dr. Hua at the Ruvo Center for Brain Health and Reagan Comas, who's here to my right, who you will hear from shortly, who advocate on their behalf. They are truly doing terrific work. And of course, there's Senator Dondero Loop, who was kind enough to bring this bill forward to you. We are honored to be here today at her request, as the actions she's taking will help raise awareness and hopefully lead to a path of something more. Ideally, to educate and raise awareness on early detection, to provide the proper diagnoses, treatment, and long-term care for those that need it, and to aid professionals in their continued research that they need to do to battle this silent killer. So I ask this committee today, without delay, please consider passing 286 as the first step on our journey, working together on these issues to raise awareness, prolong lives, and ultimately beat this disease. Since, as Dr. Hua told us when she met with us, time equals brain. Humbly thank you for your time and consideration of this bill, and welcome any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Donyate and members of the committee. My name is Reagan Comas with R&R Partners here today representing the Cleveland Clinic. It is estimated that nearly 1 million individuals are living with MS currently in the United States. Multiple sclerosis is sometimes referred to as the invisible disease because many people living with MS do not outwardly exhibit symptoms. This can create a unique set of issues, and some people assume that patients don't really have the disease. This can discourage some from seeking treatment or get help for their problems. Yet we know the earlier you obtain a proper diagnosis and start the appropriate therapy, this can reduce the risk of future disability. One of the early diagnoses include general awareness about this disease. The onset of MS often occurs between the ages of 20 and 40 years old, with warning signs including blurry vision, numbness and tingling, weakness, balance issues, cognitive impairment, bladder and bowel dysfunction, with additional red flags including joint pain and rash. The Mellon program at the Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health is the only comprehensive MS center in Nevada. We currently serve around 2,000 lives and see over 3,500 patients a year. We have conducted 26 clinical trials and have tested 5 newly approved FDA drugs. Yet we continue to return to early detection and diagnosis provides the best outcomes for our patients. This is why we're here in strong support of SB 286 to increase the awareness around multiple sclerosis, provide tools for families to find the assistance and support that they need, and to emphasize the importance of seeing a doctor if you or a loved one exhibit any of the signs or symptoms of the disease. Thank you for your time.
And my name is Tom Hum. I'm David's brother, and I'm Lori's brother, and I'm here to put the human side to this. Before I do that, I would like to thank Senator Dondero Loop for this, and I would like to thank you all for your time today. My brother was a quarterback. I was a receiver. We shared the same bedroom growing up. We shared the same dorm room at Nebraska when we played together in college. This man took care of his body on all accounts, and I watched him wither away because in the 70s, if you played football, you were never hurt. So he thought he could overcome everything. And then after our sister was diagnosed, and she saw what happened to her big brother, and she had 2 young babies, she sought out immediate treatment because, as she pointed out to all of us, I want to see my children grow up. So on behalf of the Hum family, first of all, we just want to thank you all for your kindness. It's a terrible disease, and it affects many, many people, and it's a slow and painful disease, so anything you can do for the community and for our residents and our citizens, thank you for your time.
Senator Donate, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer, or we are happy to step away.
Does anyone have any questions at this time? Senator Stone.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to the family for being here, and thank you for your presentation. And at the Cleveland Clinic, besides just treating MS, are you actually doing any research? You mentioned you were using some investigational drugs, but they haven't been able to come to a conclusion that there's any genetics involved. There hasn't been a gene that's been discovered for this, although there's some hypothesis that it might be 200 or 300 genes that might be responsible for it. I was just curious what kind of research that the Cleveland Clinic is doing, a clinic that I'm so proud to have here in Nevada.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Reagan Comas for the record. We are doing extensive research on MS. We do research on additional diseases as well, but we are and trying to find ways to increase treatment and lessen that disability. I cannot tell you the exact number of studies that we're doing right now, but I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards.
That's okay. I'm just delighted to hear that you're doing research and trying to prevent the morbidity and mortality associated with this devastating disease. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Chair, for the ability to speak, and thank you all for being here. As a provider who has had way too many patients show up in my office with double vision, some weakness, presenting symptoms sometimes, and then trying to get that referral because I knew almost immediately on physical exam what it could be. I appreciate the ability to have a place where these families could turn and maybe not take that delay getting them into that next step. The neurologists, we're always happy to see them eventually, but it's that delay sometimes, and families just don't know what else to do. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Let's move to support testimony. If there is anyone in this room that would like to provide testimony and support, please step forward. Ms. Fuller, if you can go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Helen Foley, and today I'm representing myself. As a former graduate, or as a graduate of Bishop Gorman High School, I served as cheerleader when David and Tommy were on the field and we took state in Nevada. I also know Lisa Foster very well, and she was such a dynamic member of our lobbying team for so many years, and it's tragic to think that she could have been diagnosed so much earlier and received better care if she had only known what her diagnosis was. So I actively support this, and thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Nielsen, and today I'm actually testifying on behalf of myself. I was 23 when I was first showing signs of multiple sclerosis, and I was 27 when I was diagnosed. Before my diagnosis, I knew of the disease because my aunt Renee Florence was diagnosed as a young child. She is now completely bedbound and depends on others to help her assist with every aspect of her life. My aunt was a part of the first rounds of testing of DMT drugs, and because of people like her, treatments are available and available much sooner. I receive my treatment at the Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health, and I applaud their hard work alongside the senator. Because of them, I'm hopeful that I will watch my daughters walk down the aisle. It's vital that this bill passes to allow for earlier access to information and hopefully prolong the life and livelihood of those who receive this devastating diagnosis. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przezinski, and as the other two ladies, I am here representing myself today. And I want to thank Senator Darrow Loop for the proclamation that she presented on the Senate floor today. I have worked with Lisa Foster for the last 14 years, and I think early awareness would have helped a lot in her journey with multiple sclerosis. She's doing okay. She's doing fine. You know, if you know Lisa at all, you know that she's very strong, but it is a struggle. So this bill will bring more awareness to people. And so I really appreciate you hearing about it today, and I hope that there's full support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in Carson City that would like to provide testimony and support? Anyone in Las Vegas, and anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 286, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Anyone in opposition? Anyone in Las Vegas, and anyone virtually?
If you would like to provide testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 286, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, anyone in neutral on this bill? No one here, no one in Las Vegas, anyone neutral?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 286, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. I think this is probably one of the most beautiful moments of the legislature, which is when we recognize a moment like this brought to us by Senator Darrow Loop, where all of us are in unison. So I would like to go ahead and entertain a motion to work session this bill.
I'd so move to work session Senate Bill 286.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Nguyen and a
Second?
second from Senator Titus. Any questions on the motion? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Bill is not work sessioned, and I'll go ahead and assign that to Vice Chair Nguyen. We'll go ahead and close the hearing, and we'll take a short recess. We're back from recess. We have been joined by our guest for our next presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 232. This bill requires a state plan for Medicaid to include coverage for postpartum care services. We have our Majority Leader, Senator Canizaro, so please proceed when you are ready.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Danyate and members of the committee. For the record, I am Nicole Canizaro, and I represent Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley. And I am very pleased to be here today to present to you Senate Bill 232. This is a bill that has never been discussed during a legislative session, so it's great to be here to be able to have this conversation. This bill extends a recipient's Medicaid coverage for postpartum care services to 12 months from the current 60-day period. Joining me today, I am extremely honored to have with me Assemblywoman Michelle Gorlow. And so, Mr. Chair, if it pleases the committee, I would like to give some remarks and then turn it over to my co-presenter to round us out. So by way of background information, currently about 1 in 3 pregnancy-related deaths occur between 1 week and 1 year after childbirth, making postpartum a vital intervention point for healthcare providers. A disruption of healthcare coverage, particularly amongst those covered under Medicaid, is a common cause of death during this timeframe, contributing to stark ethnic and racial disparities in maternal health outcomes. Nevada has about 22.5 deaths compared to 15.7 deaths per 100,000 live births nationwide. African Americans have a 4 times higher chance of death while pregnant or within 1 year of giving birth. Within 6 months of giving birth, research shows that over 20% of women covered under pregnancy-related Medicaid become uninsured, a crucial intervention point due to income and having to find insurance coverage. This period, sometimes referred to as the 4th trimester, allows healthcare providers to address delivery complications, identify postpartum depression, and serves as a transitional time from obstetric care to primary care. In Nevada, with about 55% of births in 2021 covered by our Medicaid program, it is currently the largest payer of perinatal care. Existing law allows Medicaid to continue postpartum coverage for up to 60 days after childbirth, but that leaves potentially 305 additional days of high risk and vulnerability for the person who gave birth. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, at least 25 states have made strides to extend postpartum Medicaid coverage. On the federal level, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 allowed for the states to extend Medicaid coverage from 60 days up to 1 year. However, this will expire after 5 years. Extending Medicaid coverage for the postpartum period would provide Nevadans with access to health care that may decrease pregnancy-related fatalities and morbidity. Additionally, it would promote more consistent care for chronic conditions like depression, diabetes, heart issues, high blood pressure, and substance use. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I have obviously had the experience of having a child very recently and am in the process of making another. And for anyone who has either been with family members or friends or other loved ones, or who has been someone who has carried a child, the time period after you have the child, you don't just sort of walk into the room and everything is back to normal. There's not just the baby to take care of, there's also the person who carried that child, who has a whole host of potentially life-threatening and physical issues that have to be addressed. Even in the best of circumstances, your body has spent close to 10 months creating another human life and then helping to bring that life into the world one way or another. And that doesn't just happen without some very serious changes. And I think that if you've ever talked to anyone who has had a child, there's a whole range of challenges that can come with that, and some of which appear, while you're in the hospital getting ready for discharge. Some of them don't appear until afterwards. And it can be a struggle between trying to figure out how it is that you care for this new life, how it is that you're going to maintain, feeding them every 2 hours and changing their diapers and making sure that they feel comforted and safe and warm, while you're also trying to care for yourself. And to be without medical coverage and the ability to seek a medical professional, even after that 60-day period, is so critical And I think you would be hard-pressed to find someone who has given birth who says, yeah, after 60 days, everything was peachy keen, and we went right back to normal, and I never had any other questions about anything that my body was doing to kind of go from growing and having a child to, just being a body that operates to help take care of that child. And so I feel very passionately that this is something that we should be doing for Nevadans to provide that coverage, because there are so many things that have to be addressed in that postpartum period that far extend past that 60 days, and it's such an indicator of maternal health to be able to provide that access to care. Mr. Chair, if you like, I would like to go through just some portions of the bill, and then I will turn it over to Assemblywoman Gorlow. So Senate Bill 232 is short and straightforward. It requires the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services to include in the state plan for Medicaid coverage for postpartum care services for 12 months after childbirth. The bill also defines the term postpartum care services and what kind of medical care should be provided to a person following the end of pregnancy. This includes, but is not limited to, the development of a plan for postpartum care, contact with the person within 3 weeks after the end of the pregnancy, a comprehensive postpartum visit, including without limitation a full assessment of the physical, social, and psychological well-being of the person, treatment of complications of pregnancy and childbirth, including without limitation pelvic floor disorders and postpartum depression, the assessment of risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and care related to the loss of a pregnancy. I would note that we did have submitted to us from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists a conceptual amendment that more conforms some of the language in Senate Bill 232 to allow those providers to provide the standard of care that they are used to providing to their patients. And I would note that just some of the things that are even delineated within Senate Bill 232, a comprehensive postpartum visit, making sure that you're looking for risk factors for postpartum depression, a simple examination. Those are sometimes things that won't be covered by individuals who are covered by Medicaid and don't have that additional coverage. And so, you're talking about really basic medical care for someone who has undergone a very significant medical process. And so the only other thing I would note, obviously, this is a policy committee. There is a fiscal note that was attached to this bill. I am hopeful that should this bill move along, we will be able to continue that conversation with respect to the fiscal note. And the one thing that I would note is that because this is a Medicaid piece, there would be substantial federal funds to come into the state to match any state funds so that we could continue to provide this coverage. And of course, we'll talk more in depth on that hopefully in a future committee. But Mr. Chair, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michelle Gorlow. I represent Assembly District 35, and I'm really honored to be here today with Majority Leader Senator Canizaro. She really covered a lot of my remarks, so, but, I kind of want to echo a lot of what the Majority Leader said, in that everyone's pregnancies are different. Mine, actually, I was sitting here going, oh my God, it's been almost 20 years ago. That's kind of scary since I'm only 29. But, 1000%. But I had C-sections. And, at 8 weeks, I was still barely getting out of bed. I was in a lot of pain. My sister had twins. And unfortunately, they let her labor go too long. So by the time she got to the hospital, she was already crowning. And the second baby was actually feet first. So they wrapped a towel and yanked the baby out, tearing her with a 4th-degree tear. She ended up having back surgery several years later. But she was definitely sore for more than 8 weeks. There's always... there could be complications during the pregnancy, whether it's preeclampsia, which during postpartum could turn into eclampsia, which is when the blood pressure gets really, really high, and the pregnant mom can have strokes and seizures from it and even die. Gestational diabetes is another one. We want to make sure that mom's sugars are back where they need to go. So, it's so important to have that coverage definitely longer than that 60 days, because in 60% of the deaths that happen that first year of life, we can prevent those. And by expanding that prenatal or the postpartum care, I expect to see that we could save moms and families and make life better for everybody. So with that, I think she covered everything. So thank you. Thank you.
we'd love to take any questions that the committee may have at this point.
Senator Titus?
Great, thank you for the question. It's more of a statement, actually, so thank you for bringing the bill forward. As somebody who was a medical student and had a sister-in-law commit suicide at 6 months with a new baby, leaving my brother-in-law with this child, who fortunately is a wonderful young woman now, that postpartum depression, none of us saw it coming. And so recognizing that having the doctor's visits, having that follow-up, having that care is really critical regardless of what it is. Having said that, however, I love the policy. I do have a copy of the fiscal note, but I'll have another stab at that fiscal note in another committee. So I'm just going to go on record as saying love the policy.
Any other questions? Senator Stone.
Yeah, just also another statement. I'd like to thank Senator Cannizzaro and Assemblyman Wardlow for bringing this forward as a pharmacist and seeing many of my patients in my 6 pharmacies that have come in. I've recognized the incidence of postpartum depression, and another issue is lactation issues. A lot of women have lactation issues, and many don't know that there are actually some drugs. I don't know if you ever heard of the drug domperidone. It's not the champagne, but it is a drug that actually promotes lactation for women that really want to use their own mother's milk, which is healthier for the baby. And certainly with cesarean sections and complications with infection and even potential sepsis. And you mentioned the eclampsia, or the blood pressure rises, the diabetic issues. There's no doubt in my mind that you bringing this forward and it's going to pass. I'm very confident that it will pass. It's going to save lives. And so I'd like to applaud you both for bringing it forward.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Nguyen.
More of a comment as well. I'm really excited to see this. It was shocking, and then also when you said that this is the first time that this has been brought into this legislative body, and a lot of times people ask, like, why does it make a difference, or what kind of policies do you see that are being brought that are different because you think there's a female majority legislature? And this is a perfect example of that. We have many women in our body that are, the legislative body, that have had children, have gone through postpartum depression, have experienced this, have had these experiences, and to see those experiences come to fruition in policies like this is just heartwarming. So thank you for bringing this.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, because I think I would be remiss, this is the first time we've been able to have a conversation about 12-month coverage, but my colleague from Assembly District 15 has done a great job, and did a great job last session too, of advocating for additional coverage, and we worked together on some things, and she certainly led the way in asking for additional coverage for pregnancy-related pieces, and we were able to do some of that. But I think the postpartum piece kind of goes unspoken. And to your point, Senator, Madam Vice Chair, the conversations, even when we were preparing for this bill hearing, I hope I'm not oversharing, but even as we were preparing for this bill hearing, and amongst some of us, we've all had different experiences with different pregnancies and different issues that have come about. And they're multifaceted. They were different for all of us, but we can actually have that conversation about, oh yeah, and this piece, and this piece, and this piece. And I have to thank you, Senator Stone, also for pointing out, because I will tell you, I struggled very much in the lactation department, and had a lot of issues, and had to have a lot of medical intervention to actually help get that to a point where I was no longer ill and where I could continue to feed my baby. So the issues that women face postpartum vary between pregnancies, they vary between different women, and we've all been able to, I think, have those conversations about, well, when I had my baby, here's kind of the things that we went through, and to not have access to the care that allows you to address all of those issues, knowing that they take a different form with every pregnancy and with every person, to me just sounds so frightening. And what a better way for us to provide for women and for their children, and to make sure that we're providing those additional services, because they really do take many, many forms. And I'm just really grateful that we can have that conversation in a real way. And certainly we'll have to talk about the fiscal pieces, but we can have that in a real way where, we've all shared stories about our challenges postpartum. And to be able to give some coverage for that, I think, is why we are so passionate about this bill. So.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. I don't think we have any other questions, so let's go ahead and move on to support testimony at this time. If you would like to provide support testimony for this bill, please come forward. We'll start here in Carson City, and then we'll move on to Las Vegas, and then virtually. We know that this is a popular bill, so we just asked folks if we could keep it to 2 minutes each. We'll start from, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. Thank you, Senator Majority Leader Canizaro and Assemblywoman Gorlow, for bringing this bill forward. My name is Dr. Tim McFerrin. I'm an OBGYN. I represent the Nevada section of the American College of OBGYNs, ACOG, which represents about 300 OBGYNs that practice throughout the state. We want to express our unwavering support for SB 232 to provide pregnant women who are eligible for Medicaid services coverage for 12 months after the end of pregnancy. This legislation could mean the difference between life and death for many women. For the too many new moms, Medicaid coverage runs out 60 days after the end of pregnancy. Lack of coverage and coverage disruptions contribute to preventable maternal deaths, more than half of which occur after 60 days when Medicaid coverage runs out. Giving pregnant women continuous Medicaid coverage for at least 1 year postpartum will help reduce preventable maternal deaths and improve outcomes for moms and babies. The postpartum period is simultaneously a time of vulnerability and maternal health risk and a transitional period with often unmet maternal health needs. Many new moms become uninsured during the vulnerable weeks and months after childbirth due to an arbitrary 60-day Medicaid cutoff post-delivery. Those new moms with high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, and especially postpartum depression lose their insurance and lose access to important medical and mental health care. Our nation's and Nevada's rate of maternal mortality is rising. Evidence confirms that postpartum insurance disruptions are a major contributing factor to this maternal health crisis. As Senator Canizaro said, about 50% of births in Nevada are covered by Medicaid. Medicaid has a critical role to play. It is more important than ever to ensure that the postpartum women in Nevada have continuous coverage for 12 months after their pregnancy ends. Nationally, this is a bipartisan legislation. 40 states have either passed or in the process of passing passing into law 12-month postpartum Medicaid coverage. Our neighboring states, including Utah and Arizona, have already signed this into law. Let us be the 41st state. Thank you for the opportunity to voice our support for SB 232, and I'm available for questions also.
Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Doñate and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Caitlin Gatchalian, Caitlin Gatchalian, and I'm the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association, Nevada Division. On behalf of the American Heart Association, we support SB 232, which extends postpartum Medicaid coverage from 60 days to 12 months. Health insurance status is one important dimension of access to care, and studies have documented disparities in health insurance coverage among low-income, young, and minority populations, as well as adverse maternal and infant outcomes among uninsured and Medicaid-covered women. Women diagnosed with hypertensive disorder or pregnancies are at risk for future cardiovascular disease and events. More than 1 in 3 maternal deaths occur following birth, with cause-specific mortality from heart disease and stroke being highest in the 6 weeks to a year after giving birth. We all want babies to have the best possible start in life. Ensuring the expectant parent has access to care during and for the first year after giving birth is essential for providing a healthy and successful start. Extending Medicaid coverage from 60 days to 12 months following birth is important to addressing health issues that are discovered during pregnancy or resulting from pregnancy, and will allow lower-income pregnant women to obtain comprehensive hair coverage so that they can get all of health care services they need to be healthy during and following pregnancy. Better birth outcomes due to fewer costly medical complications during pregnancy. Lower risk of health problems for baby during infancy and long-term benefits throughout growth and development. Higher rate of women more likely to seek well child visits and immunization for their children. Assistance with early identification and treatment of postpartum depression, quitting smoking, preventing violence, and treating substance use disorders. Caring for women and birthing parents in their reproductive years while ensuring maternal health is equitable across populations begins long before pregnancy and lasts well beyond childbirth. Saving mom's life requires a policy roadmap to better health. The American Heart Association supports SB 232.
And Chair, if I may, I just want to speak on behalf of myself and as a mother. This is a really important bill. I have seen so many friends who have struggled getting care after that Medicaid period of 60 days, and I think it's really important that we support this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. It's wonderful to be in this committee for the first time this session. My name is Holly Wellborn. I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Alliance, testifying in support of SB 232. We thank the Majority Leader and Assemblywoman Gorlow for their leadership. Access to postpartum health care impacts the entire family. The first years of a child's life are crucial for long-term health and stability. This bill will ensure new parents can access care and focus on their responsibilities of getting their baby off to a strong start in life. As Assemblywoman Gorlow said, over 60% of total maternal deaths after pregnancy are preventable. The loss of a parent places a child at risk for detrimental health outcomes and poor development. By implementing this bill, we will save thousands of lives and ensure adequate health coverage during a highly vulnerable period. We encourage your support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We're here today in strong support of SB 232 because extending postpartum Medicaid coverage to 12 months will help ensure that parents and babies in Nevada thrive together. We thank Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro and Assemblywoman Gorlow for spearheading this critical measure. In Nevada, pregnant people with Medicaid health insurance lose their coverage only 60 days postpartum. This leaves new moms without access to contraceptives, important follow-up visits with their OB or primary care doctor, and any necessary mental health support. Stable year-long postpartum coverage, a long-standing recommendation by the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, would help new parents deal with any postpartum health issues they may face and fulfill their responsibility of getting their baby off to a healthy start in life. We urge this body to support SB 232. Thank you for your time.
Hello, thank you. My name is Carolyn Mello-Robertson. I'm the Southwest Regional Director for NARAL Pro-Choice America and a lead staffer for NARAL Pro-Choice Nevada. I submitted longer comments on the record, but much has already been noted. Just wanted to say that we have more than 48,000 members across the state of Nevada, and we truly believe that reproductive freedom means the ability to plan your families and your futures, including the right to have children and to be supported to do so. We're very, very thankful to the Senate Majority Leader for bringing forward this bill, as well as Assemblywoman Gorlow, as folks that have advocated for healthcare options for working families. We're really excited to see this go forward. I will say personally, you all remember when I was pregnant myself in 2017, and I remember having a lot of resources and support at my disposal and still feeling very much like I needed the help of qualified medical providers, and I had the ability to do that. And every Nevadan should have that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Doñate, and members of the committee. For the record, Katie Ryan with Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican. Just want to echo everything that's been said. And on a personal note, as someone whose blood pressure did not come back to normal for almost a year after my pregnancy with my little Jack Ryan, and postpartum depression and all of that, I cannot imagine going through that without insurance. So thank you, and I hope you all support this bill today. Thank you.
Isaac Tenorio with Strategy 360, representing the Valley Health System of Hospitals. I want to thank Majority Leader Cannizzaro and Chair Gorlow for this historic piece of legislation. Postpartum care will lead to healthy babies and healthy moms, and want to echo the statements that have been made already, and thank you for Chair Dunyate and the committee members for this opportunity. Thank you.
My name is George Ross. I'm here on behalf of HCA Healthcare, which is Sunrise Children's, Southern Hills, and Mountain View Hospitals. We strongly support this bill. We urge you to pass it. There's nothing more I can say that the sponsors of this bill, Senator Cannizzaro and Assemblywoman Garlow, and the previous testimony made it very clear that there's tremendous need in the state for this bill. I would say that a personal note, my wife delivered 7 children. My daughters and daughters-in-law have delivered 16 children. I have seen quite a few post-delivery psychological and physical situations in those years, and I think that every Nevada lady deserves exactly the same kind of insurance coverage that my wife and my daughters and daughters-in-law had, and they need it badly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Tess Opferman. I am here on behalf of the Nevada Women's Lobby. I will keep this very brief, but I want to say one important statistic. The United States has the highest maternal mortality rate of any high-income country in the world. Nevada is no exception, and 60% of those deaths can be prevented. Please pass this bill.
Joan Hall, Nevada Rural Hospital Partners. Short and sweet. I urge your support of this bill.
Good afternoon, Nancy Bowen with the Nevada Primary Care Association. Just here really short and sweet like Joan, we support this bill. Thank you.
Leah Case on behalf of the Nevada Psychiatric Association and the Nevada Public Health Association, ditto.
Pat Kelly from the Nevada Hospital Association. You've heard enough from me this week, so I'm simply going to say we're all on board with this. Thank you, and I can be short and succinct.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Jonathan Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers, representing kids in foster care, both babies and teenage moms. So we strongly support this. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Donate. My name is Eric Jang, ERICJNG, here as Acting Executive Director for One API Nevada, also representing our C3, Asian Community Development Council, and its affiliated Healthy Asian Pacific Islander Medical Center. We are also a healthcare enrollment provider, and we see how great this bill can do for our community. So thank you, and we fully support this bill.
Thank you so much. Anyone else looking to testify in support? That was the fastest I had to press the timer in any hearing. We'll go to Las Vegas.
For the record, Jolina Simpson, JOLLINA with Make It Work Nevada. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Make It Work Nevada is in full support of SB 232. Providing appropriate postpartum medical coverage is a social, civil, and human rights movement to address the unprecedented loss of life, legacy, and family financial stability. Make It Work Nevada strongly supports this medical expansion for postpartum support for up to 1 year. And I am going to add my voice as a postpartum mom who actually did lose her coverage during that 6 weeks. And I had high blood pressure issues, and I was not able to get to mental health support for over a year. And there were many days in that year where I thought I was going to need to leave my babies behind in order to leave them with a better life, because what I was experiencing wasn't it, and I had no help. Or if I did have help, it came in the fits and spurts of free clinics, which gave me 3 visits, and then I'd have to wait 6 months and get another 3 visits. That kind of coordination of care is too much for any family to navigate, but a postpartum parent dealing with the physical rigors of just having a baby and then raising that baby, and then the emotional, psychological, and societal rigors of trying to support and care for oneself doesn't need any more barriers. It doesn't need any more. We need ease and we need support. Again, Make It Work Nevada fully supports this bill, and we really think and hope that you will support it too.
extremely hard to follow that. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. This is Brian Iriye. I'm Brianiriye. I'm a maternal fetal medicine subspecialist in northern and southern Nevada. I'm the president of Hera Women's Health, which is a national women's healthcare firm, and I'm the former president of the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine in the United States. Thank you for allowing me to speak today about the crucial need to extend postpartum coverage for a year. Every year, thousands of women in Nevada rely solely on Medicaid for prenatal care, labor, delivery, and postpartum care. Unfortunately, under the current system, where the coverage expires after 60 days, roughly, it leaves countless women and new mothers without essential health care during a critical period of recovery and adjustment. With the factors of increased financial stress, with a mouth to feed, another new area for a baby to be placed, and increased pediatric and postpartum appointments, and the stressors of reduced sleep and financial and medical challenges. Extending postpartum coverage for Medicaid for 1 year is not only a matter of compassion, but also a matter of public health. Maternal morbidity and mortality rates, have you heard, in the United States are alarmingly high in compared to other developed countries, but a stat not presented is almost 20% of these deaths in some states occur in the postpartum period, and they peak at approximately 9 months postpartum. So extending this coverage beyond 60 days is critical to have women to get the necessary care to identify and address issues early and prevent avoidable tragedies for their families. To illustrate this impact of the policy change, I'd like to talk about a story that happened in our office, but I will give the patient a separate name. Let's just say her name is Maria. Maria gave birth to her first child receiving care from our office for opioid use and faced several health challenges in the months following her delivery, including treatment for opioid use disorder and postpartum depression. After delivery, she had to be transitioned into care with another provider due to lapse in coverage and was placed in a non-pregnancy based facility. Her new provider wanted to arrive at 6 a.m. in the morning, wait in line with her new baby while already fatigued, sleep deprived, and with many other demands. Her care was now incompatible with her circumstances. She eventually began using illicit drugs again. Her depression increased. She stopped breastfeeding and did not attend her postpartum visits. Because Medicaid coverage expired after 60 days, she couldn't get convenient, timely, adequate medical care. And her father was heartbroken and showed up to our office. He wanted his old daughter back, who was better than she had been in years. He was hopeful for his grandchild and the life that his daughter had reachieved with medical care. His pleading for seeing her made us reinitiate care for people 1 year postpartum without insurance. However, you know this is not a long-term or sustainable solution. Maria's situation is not unique. Almost done. Countless mothers in Nevada face similar challenges, lacking healthcare support they desperately need during this vulnerable time and need this critical care. So in conclusion, extending postpartum Medicare coverage for 1 year after delivery significantly addresses the public health crisis of maternal morbidity and mortality, will improve healthcare outcomes for women in Nevada and their families, and reduce preventable complications.
Thank you so much,
and a more
sir.
resilient community.
We'll have to move on to the next speaker, but we appreciate your comments, and if they can be submitted in writing, we'd greatly appreciate it. Anyone else in Las Vegas? Let's move on to virtual.
If you would like to testify in support of SB 232, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Leanne McAllister. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics in strong support of SB 232. Infants born on Medicaid and CHIP are guaranteed a full year of coverage, and pediatricians know that babies do better when the person who gives birth to them has coverage too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Chris June Kiliani speaking in support of 232. And also on behalf of the the NAACP WIN committee, the Women in NAACP, which promotes leadership and works on healthcare issues. This legislation is timely and much needed. It's common sense, and it's a great equalizer for all women, especially women of color. I had a young woman that was a friend and was pregnant at age 38. She went undiagnosed after she had her baby with PTSD or PPD, and the 60 days would have cut her off. So the 1 year is absolutely imperative to be maintained. Black women are 3 times more likely to have a maternal health than white women in the United States. Awareness of the risk can heighten stress and anxiety during pregnancy, potentially placing women of color at risk for the PPD. PPD affects 1 in 8 new mothers, but the risk is significantly higher for new mothers of color. Notably, while Black women are more likely to have PPD, they are less likely to receive help. Identifying and understanding these factors may be a life-saving measure, and that's a key part of this legislation, is to make sure that people are screening them for what may be going on. And unfortunately, much of the research that has been conducted and the screening tools have focused on white women. So maybe a better result of this could be better looking at our women of color and their needs for them and their children. I urge your strong support for this bill. Thank you very much.
Hello, Chair Dunyate and committee members. My name is Matt Turner. It's M-A-T-T-T-U-R-N-E-R, and I'm the father of 3. I'm calling to support the bill, obviously. My partner is an advocate for birth equity and access, and through that, as well as my own parenting experiences, I've learned about the toll birth has on the physical and mental well-being of those that give birth. Now, we were fortunate to have an uncomplicated, unmedicated, out-of-hospital birth. We had the privilege of a postpartum doula, as well as medical insurance that covered postpartum care. So I really can't imagine what it would have been like to recover from a more complicated birth. And you've seen from the stats how important that is. But even with our best case scenario, it took at least a year for my partner to fully recover from the childbirth experience. So as a psychologist and as a...
My name is Brianna Scamilla, Brianna-Scamilla for the record, and I'm calling on behalf of Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada in support of SB 232. We support this bill because true reproductive freedom and justice includes access to all aspects of reproductive health care, including coverage for postpartum services. All new mothers deserve to have coverage for the care that they need to maintain healthy lives and care for their child. This is especially true for communities that historically lack access to health care. Maternal mortality for Black mothers is a health crisis in this country, and increasing access to all forms of reproductive health care, especially postpartum and follow-up care, is essential to beginning to address these issues of deep-seated racial inequities in our healthcare system. We're so proud to support this legislation and thank the Majority Leader and Assemblywoman Gorlow for introducing it. We urge you to support SB 232. Thank you for your time.
My name is Jessica Holly, Hollie, longtime Las Vegas resident. And as a mother who suffered from postpartum depression, these services need to be offered. This is clearly a bipartisan bill, regardless of political affiliation and beliefs on other birth issues. We all want healthy babies, and we want their mothers to take care of them. You know, Las Vegas social services continues to fall short of actual support for low-income families and families of color, Nevada in general. So, you know, this is one step towards a more positive future where we're not continually stressing out every other support system that's out there for families, because we are dropping the ball here. If you don't give these additional benefits, you're going to continue to overwhelm our other systems because there's just not enough help out there. There's not enough redirection of the wealth that is basically circling around in Nevada, and it's not trickling down to the people who actually need it, those who help run this society every single day. So, if you want their mothers to care for the children, we actually need the mothers to be mentally and physically healthy enough to do so, and that means having common sense medical coverage, like expanding this Medicaid in the state. So yeah, y'all should really think about that.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Richards. I'm just testifying as a mom. I'm 2 weeks postpartum with my son, and already I have had so many appointments with my first child. I didn't realize until months later that I had dislocated my hip and my rib cage was out of place. And it took months of physical therapy to learn to walk again and to heal from that. If I had been a Medicaid recipient, I just would not have received care. I was told it was lucky that I did receive care when I eventually went. Otherwise, I would have needed hip replacement surgery and additional care. And so I was able to receive that care. Every mom should be able to receive that care, and every Nevadan deserves that. Thank you to the Majority Leader and Assemblywoman Gorelo for bringing this legislation, and I strongly urge your support.
Good afternoon, committee members. This is Dora Martinez, representing the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. Thank you to the sponsors, Madam Leader Chair Canzaro and Michelle Gorlo for the bill, and we fully support this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Anna Binder for the record. I'm sitting here listening as a mother to 5 children that I birthed. My first 3 without insurance, my 4th one with a corporate insurance, and my 5th with state insurance. I too suffered a hip injury that I can't even begin to tell you how terrible it was to get care for. But there's also a huge gap in the community between those who qualify for Medicaid and those who still don't and still can't afford the care even under the plans that they have. And I'm so glad that this is coming forward, but something I didn't hear today, and as a mother and someone who's lived this, going without insurance or necessary covered care left a mother like me in a very, very bad spot financially, emotionally, and was never able to rest for years after childbirth. So those are my fault and my decisions, right, as a result. But at the same time, the access, even with some insurance, is just terrible in our state. So anything we can do to alleviate women, it is very vitally important that they rest and heal themselves after creating new life. And thank you, everyone, for your voices today.
Chair, there is no additional testimony in support of SB 232 at this time.
Thank you so much. Anyone in opposition? Anyone in Las Vegas? And anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 232, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. There are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, anyone wishing to testify in neutral on this bill? Anyone in Las Vegas? And anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 232, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Majority Leader, do you have any closing remarks? No? Okay. Well, I think in hearing the testimony, it's important to reflect that in some cases, we do have to take action. So I would like to entertain a motion to amend and do pass. Oh, I'll close the hearing first on this bill, and then we'll move on to the work session. Vice Chair Nguyen?
Discussion?
No motion.
Oh, motion. I'd so move to amend and do pass Senate Bill 232.
Second.
And we got a second from Senator Stone. Any discussions on this motion? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I stated earlier, I absolutely love the policy. Looking at the fiscal note, we'll have to do a deeper dive on that. So I actually believe, looking at the fiscal note, that they didn't take into consideration the potential savings that we would be making by this bill. And so just to put that on the record, that I'll pass this out of committee with the understanding I may have to change if we can't come to a correct fiscal note on this thing. So, but I believe, as a fiscal conservative, it makes good sense to pass this bill because I think we'll save money, not only lives, but the reality is I think it will save healthcare dollars too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Titus. Any other comments or discussion? Moving on to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The vote is unanimous, and the motion is carried to amend and do pass. And I will go ahead and assign that floor statement to Senator Ling. All right, let's move on to our next item on the agenda. I am pleased to welcome folks from NCSL. I asked in the conversation of telehealth, etc., I asked our colleagues from NCSL to present it, and so we have Ms. Sarah Jeroman, who is a policy analyst, to proceed. So when you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will share my screen. Okay, so thank you again, Chairman Donyate and members of the committee for having me today. I am honored to be here. First and foremost, my name is Sarah Jeroman, and I'm a policy analyst in NCSL's health program. I work on our healthcare team, which covers access, cost, and coverage issues, and my specific portfolio covers telehealth, scope of practice, and healthcare workforce issues. So for today's presentation, I'm going to do a very, very brief level setting on telehealth. I will then highlight state trends and go a little bit more in depth into telehealth parity and private payer laws before wrapping up with some recent changes and a few in-depth state examples. And before we get started, I do just want to remind you all that we are your national bipartisan membership organization. And then listed here are a few of the services that we do provide to you all. And I do just want to note that any of the policy or state examples that I will reference today are purely for informational purposes and does not indicate NCSL support. So as you can see here, telehealth is still a really hot topic in the legislatures this session. As of last week, there were 482 bills that had been introduced in state legislatures related to telehealth. There have been over 500 proposed rule changes, so changes that are not happening through legislation, but rather at that executive level through state Medicaid programs or state boards. And all of the bills can be categorized into 7 major categories that you see on your screen or you have in front of you. And really just to add a little bit more context, 295 of those 482 bills or rule changes relate to Medicaid reimbursement, and 114 of them relate to private payer reimbursement. Not all of the bills are explicitly related to parity, but a decent amount of them are. And lastly, I do just want to note that according to the Center for Connected Health Policy, or CCHP, it is expected that many of the upcoming changes to telehealth in 2023 will be nuanced and specific rather than the broader all-encompassing telehealth laws that really categorize the pandemic. So on the screen, you'll see the 4 primary modalities used for telehealth, as I'm sure you all know. And when talking about state actions related to telehealth, I'll primarily be talking about these 4 modalities. So live video, store and forward, remote patient monitoring, or audio only. And so, as you all know, there are a great variety of telehealth flexibilities that related to Medicare at the federal level as a result of the public health emergency. These include eliminating some site restrictions, expanding reimbursable services, modalities, and providers, as well as requiring the same rate of reimbursement for telehealth as in-person care, otherwise known as payment parity. But The federal public health emergency will be expiring on May 11th, 2023, and CCHP released guidance on what this will mean for patients, providers, and states, etc. So there are a few things that CMS has announced will be staying permanently. That includes Medicare reimbursement for eligible telehealth services for patients located in both a geographically rural area and at an eligible originating site. But I do want to note for you all that it does not include the home as an originating site in most cases. Next is Medicare reimbursement for mental health telehealth services, including audio only in some cases, provided that there is an in-person visit within the first 6 months of an initial telehealth visit and then every 12 months thereafter. And then lastly, Medicare reimbursement for federally qualified health centers and rural health clinics for mental health services delivered via audio only or live video will continue to be covered. And then next,
Sir,
there are a few different dates.
Sir, can I stop you?
Flexibility.
Can I stop you really
Yeah.
quickly just on the back, if you can go to the back slide, the one that you were just on?
Yeah.
Just for context purposes for the legislators, because we will be having a discussion in the next bill on this. The legislation that has been introduced in other states, are most of them aligning to what Medicare is aligning towards, or what has been the trends that you're starting to notice?
I think it really varies by state in terms of what they're doing. A lot of what we've been seeing so far really is states trying to clarify exactly what is going to be expiring, and then also trying to figure out the differences between their Medicare populations and then their Medicaid populations, and figuring out how those are going to overlap and what they're going to see. I will talk about some of the state trends in terms of the flexibilities they are doing a little bit later. But in general, I think right now we haven't seen a ton of legislation going through. It's really right now a lot on clarity of what is actually going away and what states could potentially do to make up for that gap, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah, of course. So there are a few different dates at which certain flexibilities will be expiring, and those will be those that expire immediately on May 11th, those that end at the end of the calendar year in which the PHE ends, and then December 31st, 2024. Two that will be immediately expiring are the use of HIPAA non-compliant remote communication products by providers and teleprescribing. So prescribing controlled substances over telehealth without an in-person examination. I do want to note there are new proposed rules from the DEA and HHS, but they have yet to be approved, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on if it does get approved. And then next is flexibilities that will be expiring at the end of this calendar year, and that is virtual presence for direct supervision. It's primarily relevant to teaching settings where residents are overseen by teaching physicians, and then reimbursement for codes on Medicare's Category 3 list. Some may be added to Categories 1 or 2, which would allow for permanent reimbursement, but that also still remains to be seen. And then lastly, it's flexibilities expiring on December 31st, 2024, which is Medicare reimbursement for telehealth services provided to patients at home, Medicare reimbursement for the expanded list of providers, which includes occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech and language pathologists, and audiologists, and reimbursement of FQHCs and RHCs as distance site providers for non-mental health services. And then lastly, Medicare coverage of audio-only telehealth for non-mental health visits. So moving a little bit more into the state realm, here are just some state telehealth policy levers that legislators may choose to pursue, and we have seen pursue. So moving into Medicaid, states have a great deal of flexibility and authority in determining Medicaid reimbursement for healthcare services provided via telehealth. Some Medicaid policies are enabled or mandated through state law, but a significant number of them take place within a state's executive branch through Medicaid rules and regulation, which are those 500 proposed rule changes that I talked about earlier. And through these policy actions, states have the option to determine whether to allow for telehealth, what types of services they want to cover, where in the state it can be used, how it's implemented, what Medicaid reimburses for telehealth, and what types of qualified practitioners may deliver services to Medicaid enrollees via telehealth. And similar to the boom in private insurance coverage, which I will talk about a little later, requirements for telehealth Medicaid reimbursement for all telehealth modalities has increased significantly over the past decade. 17 states currently stipulate Medicaid coverage and reimbursement for all 4 common telehealth modalities. All state Medicaid programs include policies that provide some type of reimbursement for live video telehealth consults, but the scope of these policies does vary. And then beyond live video, 25 states allow for reimbursement of store and forward, 34 states cover remote patient monitoring, and 34 states plus the District of Columbia reimburse for audio only. And then lastly, some states have recently added the place of service code 10, including Louisiana and Rhode Island, which allows the home to serve as an acceptable originating site for telehealth services. They join the other 32 states and DC who explicitly allow for reimbursement of telehealth services that originate within the home, bringing that total number to 36 states and DC reimbursing for telehealth services that take place within the home. Audio only represents the biggest change in telehealth policy since the pandemic. According to the Commonwealth Fund, only 3 states explicitly required reimbursement of audio only prior to 2020. And now 34 states, including Nevada and DC Medicaid programs, reimburse for audio only telehealth in some capacity, although it is often with limitations. And the most common limitation is only reimbursing for audio only if it is for telebehavioral health services. 5 states have added audio only reimbursement since spring of 2022, and it does remain the most common modality being added by states. This was especially helpful for rural or underserved patients that don't have access to broadband or are unable to access video services. So I'm not going to spend long on cross-state licensing because I do want to dive into parity, but I do want to note that the adoption of provider compacts and telehealth-specific licensing is really one of, if not the biggest trend that we are currently seeing in telehealth in terms of state law. Currently, 25 states have active telehealth-specific licensing, and there are 8 active provider compacts with varying participation. That 25 states is up from 13 states in 2022. And I do also want to note that there is a 9th compact that is the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Compact, but not enough states have enacted it in order for it to become active. So let's talk about parity. So more specifically, the difference between coverage parity and coverage or service parity and payment parity. So if a state mandates coverage or service parity, it means an insurer must cover telemedicine services if they would cover that same service were it delivered face-to-face. In other words, if a service is covered in person, it must be covered when delivered by telemedicine. Coverage or service parity does not guarantee the same rate of reimbursement or payment. It only relates to coverage of services. As of right now, coverage parity is more common than payment parity, and I will cover the specific numbers in a few slides. Payment parity, on the other hand, requires insurers to reimburse at the same payment rate for telehealth services as in-person care. The specific wording in bills can range from not less than, not more than, or the same as in-person services. And another thing to keep in mind is that some states only have payment parity for specific types of providers or services and not others, such as only requiring payment parity for mental health providers or physical therapists, but it's not always blanket payment parity of all health providers. And then lastly, I do just want to note that the Medicare policy that reimbursement for telehealth be at the same rate of payment as in-person care is set to expire at the end of 2023. So, for some overall background and trends within private payer laws and parity, the map that you see on your screen provides a little bit of background for private insurance laws. In 2012, 16 states had enacted private insurance laws, but each state law tends to vary greatly. For example, variance between coverage or payment parity requirements. In 2021, CCHP analyzed private payer telehealth coverage before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. They did so by focusing on the 7 largest US-based health insurers with a particular interest on changes from March of 2020 through January 2021. The report notes that even prior to the pandemic, in 2019, almost all of these insurers had offered some type of coverage for telehealth services. This is due in large part to both market trends, but also the increase in private payer laws that were requiring service parity even prior to the pandemic. Most commonly covered services before the pandemic were live video telehealth. And then at the onset of COVID-19 and the public health emergency, CCHP found that all of the major insurers voluntarily expanded their telehealth coverage to encompass more modalities and eligibility. In some cases, this included coverage of audio only, pay parity, and reimbursement for services from out-of-network providers. And then of the 7 major insurers, 6 of them agreed to establishing pay parity temporarily during the public health emergency, including for audio-only services. And this is particularly important because at the time, only 7 states explicitly required that they have payment parity. And then lastly, it is important to note that since their inception and up until today, many private payer laws give insurers significant leeway in setting reimbursement rates. However, according to that study that CCHP did, many of them do already reimburse at in-person rates for telehealth. But some example language of this leeway would be services shall be reimbursed at the negotiated commercially reasonable rate. So now for a more current look at the state of private payer laws, the 16 states that had private insurance laws for telehealth back in 2012 has since grown to 43 states and DC today, including Nevada. And as we have discussed, these state laws vary greatly in what private insurers are required to cover, and in some cases reimburse for telehealth. 41 states and DC require coverage parity, which, as we've been discussing, ensures private insurers cover services delivered through telehealth if they cover those services in person. And so on the map, that is both the orange and that dark blue-green that you will see have coverage parity. And then beyond coverage parity, 24 states require private insurance reimbursement for telehealth to be on the same basis or on the same rate as in-person care. In other words, they have explicit payment parity for at least one profession. It's not necessarily blanket payment parity, but they have it for at least one profession. And that is the 24 states that you will see in that orange. They have coverage parity and payment parity at this moment in time. And then as you can see, there are other states with no private insurance laws or those who have them, but there is no explicit parity within the law. So to get into some of the specifics with recent updates to private payer laws and statute, according to the Center for Connected Health Policy, 3 states have made changes to their private payer laws and statute by spring of 2022. Louisiana passed a House bill which added the requirement for payment parity specifically for physical therapy services, but all other telehealth services that are provided by physicians must be reimbursed at least 75% of the reimbursement rate for in-person care, but it does not require explicit payment parity unless it's physical therapy. Utah passed a Senate bill to include a payment parity provision, but only for mental health providers. And then they state that all other services shall be reimbursed at a negotiated rate. And then next, New Jersey passed a Senate bill in order to clarify that their private insurance law also applies to their Medicaid program and not just to private insurers. And it does limit the ability of insurers to restrict by modality. However, this stipulation is set to expire at the end of the federal public health emergency unless it is extended beyond. And then next, I have a few updates from fall of 2022. New York specifically amended their laws to include a requirement for payment parity for both private insurers and Medicaid, but they did set an expiration date on that of April 1st, 2024. And then lastly, Connecticut passed a House bill and a Senate bill, which added payment parity provisions and expanded their expiration date to June 30th, 2024. It was previously set to expire in June of 2023. I do want to note for those 2 bills that they do both have coverage parity that does not have an expiration date, but they do have an expiration date for that payment parity. Overall, from what we've been seeing is that most states are not passing new private payer laws, but the trends are in expanding payment parity to specific professions, types of services, or prolonging those temporary provisions. So for a little more in-depth look at a few states' parity requirements, in regards to Oregon, their law stipulates that a plan must provide coverage if that service would be covered were it delivered in person. The service is medically necessary. The service can be provided safely and effectively using telemedicine, and that service is also HIPAA compliant. And it also establishes that a plan is not allowed to distinguish between rural or originating sites when they're establishing coverage. And then in terms of payment parity, Oregon requires plans to have explicit payment parity, but they do make sure to note that plans are not barred from the use of value-based payment methods. And then lastly, for Arizona, their language requires explicit coverage parity, but only for telehealth services that their committee that they've established and the research that they found has assured are safe, effective, and can be properly conducted through telehealth. And then they state that those that do not have such evidence may be limited or denied in terms of coverage by insurers. And they've also included a stipulation that audio only as of January 1st, 2023 must be covered if, similarly to the above, the research supports that it can be appropriately and effectively provided. And then in terms of payment parity, Arizona requires payment parity for audio-visual services, but they do exclude audio only in that. But there is a separate provision for audio only that states that there must be payment parity for audio only when it's used for behavioral health or substance use disorder services. So just a few different exceptions and ways of phrasing these laws and statute. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you again for inviting me to present. It was an honor to be here, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions, or feel free to reach out to me directly by email. And I've also just included some of our resources that we have on telehealth, including 2 legislative databases where we do track all of the current legislation. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Chairman.
Thank you so much. I do have 2 questions, and then I'll open it up for my committee members if they have any. With regard to audio only, I know that there are trends of states looking for mental health. Are there other cases of audio only? For instance, site-based of rural health, is that something that has come up? Are there, I know in the Arizona one that you pointed was mental health and substance use. So are there, besides those, are there other cases that you've seen in states as well?
I would say, thank you, Chairman. I would say that it definitely is largely mental health and substance use based from what we are seeing, especially if they are doing payment parity. That payment parity is largely tied to behavioral health services. It's not always tied to that. And I will say as well, there are some very rural areas. We haven't seen a ton of legislation that's been moving through, but it definitely has been some discussion that we've heard or research that's taken place of is making that audio only access really imperative to rural areas, and then getting into more broadband laws and talking about what that would mean. But I think largely you're correct in that audio only is usually tied to, in terms of parity, mental health services or substance use services.
Okay, and then just my follow-up question. You know, in looking at the Oregon legislation, I know that the conversation that I've had with folks is, you know, does parity conflict with the developments that we've done towards value-based care? I know in the Oregon legislation it covered part of that. Are you seeing trends in other states looking at that as well, or how have they responded to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I will say that
Your name for the record, please.
Sorry?
Name for the record, please.
Sarah Droban, policy analyst, and thank you. I will say that I am not familiar with other bills that do explicitly talk about value-based payment methods in their parity bills, but I would be happy to collect that information if there are others, and send you that information if I can find any other bills that do explicitly talk about value-based payment methods.
Thank you so much. I think I'm good with my questions. Do any committee members have any? I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. Okay, next we will go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 119. This bill provides a continuation of certain requirements governing insurance coverage of telehealth services. With us today we have Corey Nieto, so please proceed when you are ready.
You can hear me okay. Thank you. Chair Donate, sorry, and to the committee, I appreciate you letting me present this today. My name is Corey Nieto, and I am the Director of Telehealth at Nevada Health Centers. Previously with Renown Health, having been the manager of telehealth there since 2010, and with Nevada Health Centers for 5 years. As I speak, kind of just some definitions, clarifying definitions, so you know what I'm saying when I mention an originating site, a distant site. Originating site being where the patient originates, distant site being where the provider is. Telehealth, the delivery of healthcare services from a patient to a provider in different locations, essentially through the use of audio and or video communications. At Nevada Health Centers, these are kind of their two branches of what we do at telehealth. And there is where a patient comes into a clinic and is seen with the assistance of a medical assistant, and these peripherals where they're looking in the ears or listening to heart and lung sounds. So literally a patient could walk into any of Nevada Health Centers, 18 health centers, and be connected to a provider at any one of the other health centers. And that provider at the other health center can look in their ears or listen to their heart or listen to their lungs through the use of this technology. The other branch of telehealth that we use is direct-to-consumer, and this is where a patient is using their personal device, and the provider's at a different location, obviously. So this program requires that the patient have, some internet access and some type of smart technology. I was going to go through the history of parity in Nevada, but that was previously done. So I'm just going to kind of put the spin on how this affected me as I was working in the telehealth field and trying to grow a program. So prior to 2015, patients had to be rural and they had to be at an approved originating site, a clinic or a hospital in particular. No urban patients, no patients from home, no telephone calls, and FQHCs couldn't even provide services to their own patients. So at that time, it was all about launching a relationship with patients in rural communities, being able to affect the economy of those rural communities and those patients to reduce healthcare costs, because it could cost $1,000 to go from Elko, for instance, to Reno to seek care. Importantly, in 2015, Assembly Bill 292 passed, and I think this is really important for, as we talk about Senate Bill 119, we had parity in 2015 with AB 292. And it was all about addressing the shortages of providers and lowering the cost, the triple aim, better quality, satisfaction, reduced costs. So AB 292 declared public policy for the state to encourage telehealth services, and they required Medicaid or any policy of health or industrial insurance to cover telehealth services to the same extent as services provided in person. So that was long before COVID hit. In 2015, for me, what that meant for me is that all of these patients that live in urban Nevada now could seek care. They could have telehealth services. So our 18 health centers across Nevada could interact with each other. We could, and this is a great story, we have a clinic in Jackpot, Nevada, and it's on the border of Idaho, and a very young provider that works there, and he was seeing a handful of patients a day. And because of AB 292, we can now use him to connect to our urban clinics that were maxed out and having patients walking in needing to seek care, and us not having providers available. We didn't have providers available anywhere in the state. But here we have this young provider in Jackpot seeing a few patients a day with all this capacity, and now we're able to offer walk-in access to our urban facilities. Not only did that increase access to care, but we retained that provider because of that. We kept him because he was busy. He was excited to be able to see what a provider in a more urban location would have. Another thing we were allowed to do because of AB 292 was put endpoints in schools. So we're now able to, children seek health care at night, at urgent care and ERs, and that's expensive. So putting a telehealth endpoint in a school, now we're able to provide some medical and behavioral health services in the school where the kids are and where they need it. So that was huge for me, opened the floodgates. And right about 2019, we were working towards direct-to-consumer at Nevada Health Centers. We hadn't launched it yet, and struggling kind of with adoption and culture and that type of thing to see a patient on their own device at home. And then once COVID hit and we had all these these lifting of restrictions for payment and coverage parity, we were really able to launch our direct-to-consumer program. Again, you know, patient stories. We had a little girl that was diagnosed with cancer through the use of direct-to-consumer technology. We had a patient that was seen in a clinic actually on a cart who had a murmur and ended up having an aortic valve replacement within a month. So this is true. This is real stuff. This is what I deal with every day and probably can tell I'm a little bit passionate about. Just to give you some examples of volumes, and I'm also want to share with you that in December of 2022, President Biden signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which removes that geographical location, expands originating sites, allows FQHCs to be distant site providers, and continues audio only. And I think you saw that in that previous slide or the previous presentation. So for once, CMS has and us are on the same page. The first time in my career in telehealth that we've ever been aligned with CMS. But when Senate Bill 5 expires, if we don't pass Senate Bill 119, we will not be aligned anymore. We will not have parity, and we'll go back to, Medicaid not paying for kids with getting services in schools or people getting care from their home. To give you an idea, when we opened the regulations and had payment parity, 2020, man, look at the difference in the care that was provided. Patient and provider adoption was great. We exposed patients to this form of care. We exposed providers to this form of care, and it took off. And our numbers are still high. Patients have a choice today without the fear of being exposed to COVID to get their care in person or virtually, and 17% of all encounters at Nevada Health Centers are done through telehealth. And that's patient choice. And I want to clarify this, that we do have exclusions, things that can't be done. So this is, first of all, they don't have an excluded condition, and second of all, they choose telehealth as a way to receive their care. We've hired 2 providers that all they do is telehealth services for our patients. Those were providers who actually were working at a clinic at Nevada Health Centers ready to leave, and we offered them to be telehealth providers, and they stayed with the organization. It's part of our onboarding. How we recruit providers is say, you can do telehealth, you can spend a half day at home, a full day at home, see your patients virtually if you'd like. And that's actually having providers more likely to join Nevada Health Centers. And so let me just summarize quickly, and I'm sorry. Without the assurance that providers of healthcare will be reimbursed by insurers for services provided through telehealth and resolution of other legal barriers, the full benefits of telehealth cannot be realized. I think you can see that during the COVID pandemic, by lifting the legal reimbursement restrictions, patients and provider adoption in telehealth skyrocketed. Even today, with less fear of contracting COVID, we have a large percentage of people of all ages, both rural and urban locations, who are choosing telehealth as a way to receive their health care. Unfortunately, SB 5 has a sunset date, and without SB 119, the state of Nevada will no longer have telehealth parity. Passing this bill merely takes us back to where we were in 2015, 5 years before the pandemic, and aligns us with CMS guidelines for telehealth that passed in 2022. I think I've shared some great stories, patient stories, provider satisfaction, retention, and I think that allowing this bill to pass will promote better outcomes for our patient. One more request, the CMS guidelines, as we saw, now allows audio-only telehealth services, and I just want to say that I strongly support that and request that the committee approve a conceptual amendment to allow audio only. We have used this for our behavioral health patients, but we've also used it for medical patients. We tried to do video for every patient, but we struggle with bandwidth, we struggle with the demographics that we serve, having the right hardware, having a smartphone, and then, you've got social determinants of health. We're dealing with the underserved. And they sometimes just don't understand how to use the technology. And we connect with every patient before a provider sees them to make sure we can help them with the technology, and they still can't. So if the provider can help them through the telephone, we really, really would like to have that as part of this bill. But again, if not, there is also that behavioral health piece that we don't want to have a patient with emotional issues not being able to connect virtually and then not being able to see them. You know, that telephone call will be super important. So that's it for me. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Any questions?
Definitely, I have a few. Let's start with, okay. Well, so I have a few questions, and I think part of it is in alignment to how the NCSL presentation went. So I think it's clear that everyone knows that I love telehealth. Telehealth is great. I think our patients should have access to it. Of course, what that looks like in the near term and in the long term is why this bill is as it is today. So first question, just reiterate for us, most negative effect if the payment parity does not continue. So in your perspective, based on your own experience, what is the most negative effect that we will see if we do not continue this?
So we go back to where we were in 2015, where we're mandated the only parity for telehealth in our state will be that set by CMS. And even under CMS regulations, the state doesn't have to follow. So we would not have access to any telehealth services, and potentially, you know, if Medicaid, if private payers would follow CMS guidelines, then we could have telehealth services. But if they don't want to, and if we don't pass 119, then we won't.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question. Can you go, well, I think the slides came off.
Yeah.
The slide on the encounter volumes data and the impact of telehealth parity and PHE waivers.
Which one was it?
The one with the chart on volumes, encounter volumes?
Yeah.
There you go. If you can send us the data points on that, I would greatly appreciate it. I think it's partially missing of it. We see it increase, but I want to see the actual figures of it. So if you can send that post-hearing, that'd be great. Third question. So since the parity has been enacted from COVID-19, this is more of an economic development question. And have you had, based on your experiences as on the clinical setting, have you had an increase of telehealth companies or startups approach you because we have the parity? Have you seen an increase of that since this has been enacted, or?
Corey Nieto, for the record. So you are saying in terms of telehealth companies, providers or technology?
Both. I mean, have you had
technology? Yeah.
Has that been an increase since you've seen? I mean, since 2015, then COVID, and then to now, do you have more folks approaching you because Nevada currently has this enacted?
Yes. So I'm on committees with other people. We have grant groups that people who have other telehealth people in Nevada that are trying to push telemedicine services, and we share that information. What's a good video conferencing platform? How do we deliver the best services to our patient? We're looking at remote patient monitoring and we share that. We collaborate together, and it's all about, you know, not only technology and software, but connecting our providers in Nevada with our patients in Nevada.
Okay. I will let my colleagues ask any questions next if you guys have any. Senator Stone, do you have a question? Oh, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions, and thank you for the presentation. So are all your providers Nevada providers then that do the telehealth?
Yeah, they're all employed by Nevada Health Centers, yes.
Name for the record, please.
Oh, sorry, Corey Nieto for the record.
They're all licensed Nevada providers in
Correct.
the state of Nevada?
Correct.
Okay. Because one of my concerns about the telehealth bill is that there is a risk if we allow telehealth for everybody or anybody with the requirement for them to be a Nevada provider. So that our Nevada folks who have the bricks and mortar, such as you do, perhaps these insurance companies can then contract with folks offshore, no risk, sign them up to give them $15 to see patients or listen to patients. They can get a lot done with no overhead, no cost, and no accountability. So my concern is that they must be Nevada licensed, Nevada brick and mortar folks to do this. And are you aware of any that are not, or any programs that may not be?
There are today.
Name for the record.
Oh, sorry. Corey Nieto. There are today, there were in 2015, there were in 2020. So you've heard of companies that are national companies that provide video visits to our patients. But they did that even when there wasn't parity. It's $49. So if a patient wanted to do it, they pay cash and they do it. But that prohibits us from doing it, right? If we put restrictions because of that, they're still going to do it for $49 cash if they can. But do you realize, and I think I had that, how happy our patients are that they can have that continuity of care with their provider. So I feel like it would continue just on a cash basis.
And just a little follow-up on that. And just as, for me, I think the audio component only is actually a good thing.
Nice.
In that, in rural Nevada, on these numerous calls that I'm on and video conferencing and Zoom, frequently people calling in will have to sign off the video component because of that bandwidth. And so they're on the call, they're say trying to get care, but they can't have both the video and the audio. And so I have always been a proponent of allowing audio. My God, attorneys charged by the quarter hour if you call them on the phone and ask them, or an accountant will charge you. So certainly being able to talk to your provider on the phone, if that is all you have, and especially in rural Nevada, but sometimes underserved urban areas, all they have is a phone and they can't do both. And so I'm not opposed to the audio only component because of access to care on that one. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions, and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Senator Stone?
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I share the same feelings that Dr. Titus does about the audio only, but I would hope that clinics will use every opportunity to do audio and visual, especially with certain modalities where you really need to see the patient's behavioral mechanisms. Since 2015, has your company, and you have how many, 18 clinics?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you seen any increase in your liability issues as a result of using modern day technology in lieu of seeing patients in person?
Yeah. Corey Nieto, for the record. Not that I'm aware of. So we talk about this a lot. By having dedicated telehealth providers, if a patient calls and they have an issue and they can't get in to see their PCP because they're booked, we can now offer them to see a provider today, a telehealth provider. So, you worry about the liability, but like I told you, we heard a murmur. We've, diagnosed cancer. So, and we're now able to offer same-day visits. Some days it's next-day visit, but you know how it is trying to get into PCP. So I think we're, measure that.
Thank you so much, Senator Stone. Okay, I have two more questions, and then we'll move on to testimony.
I'm glad you.
Oh, Senator Lane.
Hi. Will you still continue to have a copay?
Well, that depends on parity, right? So the way it works now is it's
Name for the record.
Oh shoot, Corey Nieto. I know. This is very exciting to me. So the way it is currently is it's paid the same in person or through telehealth. So yes, if the payer has a copay, they pay their copay for video care or telehealth. And no complaints, no complaints. There are patients, like I said, especially when you have the access you have, in our situation don't complain about paying their copay for telehealth visits.
And I noticed in looking at the fiscal notes, there are no fiscal notes on this. So it means that it's going to all take care of itself.
Senator Cornieto, for the record. Senator Doñate,
We'll have our legal counselor.
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. So if there have been no fiscal notes, that means that state agencies have viewed the original version of the bill and determined that it's not going to have a fiscal effect, but that doesn't apply to any amendments that are being suggested today.
Any other questions? All right, I'll keep going. So I'm trying to think through the scenarios as to like what would be the ramifications if we don't continue this, because I think that's important if there are amendments and we start to tug and pull, right? And the reason why I wanted to host the NCSL folks to present is because we need to be also mindful as to what's happening around us in other states, and then how that aligns to what CMS has ruled out for permanently and what's going to expire, because in some ways we should align ourselves to what CMS is going to do, but we could also do more if it's beneficial for our state. And of course, we have to take in consideration the economic development lens, right? So the scenario that I was thinking in my head was, say because I work in primary care and I've managed clinics in primary care, I know this is happening. So say I'm a patient, go in, tell my doctor, I have been fainting the last few days. That's just a scenario that I've been in. He goes, okay, well, let's do a panel for you, and then come back and see me 3 weeks or 3 weeks from now, and we'll schedule it. Well, in the same respect, right, maybe he can prescribe me some level of medication, maybe not. Maybe he wants to wait until I get the panel back before he decides what the next steps are. Then 3 weeks come by, I have my scheduled appointment, something happens. And, in that instance, rather than canceling it because I live in Pahrump or so forth, I can ask my doctor, hey, am I able to switch this to a telehealth appointment? And if he has the capability, which most providers now do based on our EHR, he can switch it to it. And that should be considered the same visit. This is a personal opinion. That could be considered as part of the conversations that we're having today. Medication adherence, right? That's another conversation. If you're diabetic and you have to go get a blood test and your physician wants to look and review in the 15 minutes that they have with you whether to change your medication amount and so forth, there's a question as to should that be billed the same way as a regular visit. And I think there's conversations as to what a visit entails, right? There are multiple visits and multiple things that get done within those 15 to 30-minute slots. And perhaps we should treat them differently, and maybe we shouldn't in some cases. I think that's up for why I wanted to have this general conversation to begin with, and what moves forward. Last question. There is feedback, and I'm sure you've seen, on the idea of value-based care and how that can contradict with what we're talking about today. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, Corey Nieto for the record. If I could just go back to your previous comments, and then I'll talk about value-based care. We're billing evaluation management codes now. That you have to have that level of care in a virtual visit, in a telehealth visit, to bill appropriately. So you don't maybe get all that biometric data, although we do ask patients if they have blood pressure cuffs at home and thermometers and scales, but you still can bill certain codes appropriately through telehealth. So it's always envisioned as a lesser service, but it's not always a lesser service. And you're right, who wants to tell a patient they have abnormal labs or imaging, or make them drive an hour and a half to see how that change in their medication went? But if they did drive, you'd get paid for it. So why couldn't you review that change in medication virtually? So thank you for mentioning that. In terms of value-based care, I came from a population health management organization, and it was all about quality, and that was before 2015. And the reason we did telehealth was to be able to reach those patients in rural Nevada in particular that would go without care because they wouldn't drive all those hours. So the value of telehealth in value-based care is definitely there. Reimbursement, yeah, that's another story. I have no idea what's going on in that world.
And last question. I know that just to take it even a step further, in terms of the quality measures, we talk about HEDIS, we talk about all those sorts of things. We want to make sure that, in some capacity, we also track patient satisfaction, how long they waited, et cetera. Have you done any research as to, specifically with telehealth, has there been a consideration of what potential legislation could look like in terms of quality metrics for telehealth? Is that something that you've had in any of the meetings that you sat on, or have you guys brainstormed as to let's make sure that the patient's actually receiving the quality of care if there is a comparison to in-person care? Has that been a conversation you've had?
Constantly. For us, constantly.
Name for the record, please.
Corey Nieto. From my standpoint, again, we're going to make sure a patient has had their preventative medicine opportunities, a pap smear, a mammogram, colorectal screening, whether it's an in-person visit or a telehealth visit. It's part of what we do. In terms of HEDIS, watching a patient take their blood pressure on a monitor, it counts. It counts. We're watching them. They're using a monitor, and that counts. A1Cs is a little different. It has to be a lab resulted A1C if we're doing diabetes, and we're doing that. You can send a patient to a lab. You can see them virtually or through telehealth and send them to a lab for their A1C measures. So yes, quality is part of telehealth visits for organizations like ours where that matters, right? We're reporting UDS and HRSA measures on quality, and we don't want it to be not counted just because a patient was seen through telehealth. So we do it for both.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I'm good. Senator Stone.
Yeah, if I could just follow up just a little bit more. First of all, let me say that I'm a strong proponent of telehealth. But, and I share the concerns of my physician colleague that we want to make sure that the providers are bona fide Nevada physicians, and that we don't want to open the floodgates for, via this bill or any other bills, that we're going to have competitors that are going to be coming in when we have this primary care shortage here in Nevada, and we have certainly shortages in the rural areas that need to be filled. So, but also one thing I'd like you to talk about a little bit more is the limitations of telehealth. So, what percentage of patients that call in or are getting a video examination, does the physician say, listen, your condition is beyond the scope of what I can do with you through telehealth. You need to get to a hospital, or you need to get to a clinic. You need to get an MRI. You need to get an X-ray. An example, let's say you have a person from a rural area is calling in and saying, hey, I've got this terrible pain in my left arm, and I'm having a lot of shortness of breath. What do I do, doctor? Okay, well, that would probably raise flags that somebody may be having a myocardial infarction or a heart attack, or maybe on the verge of having one. I don't think we would say we're just going to give you a prescription for nitroglycerin and think that will solve the problem. So tell me how you react to acute situations that have significant healthcare ramifications if a patient isn't getting seen physically in a hospital or an urgent care setting.
Corey Nieto, for the record. Thank you. So I think everybody handles that differently, but we have what's called an exclusion list. So we have a clinical body that meets once a month and develops what can and cannot be seen through telehealth. And you start with, those things that you need to tell patient go to the ER and the urgent care. They're never going to get to the telehealth providers. They're going to be asked to get, when they're scheduling their appointment, what's your complaint? You need to go to the emergency room. You need to go to the urgent care. So that's number one. And then number two is this exclusion list. So the clinical telehealth team gets together and says, yeah, right now we're struggling over rashes. Rashes are really difficult to see from a smartphone, right? So, but there are some rashes that are okay. We do encourage that patients, especially new patients, follow up with a primary care provider. We used to say, every whatever they need to see their primary care provider in person, but it's really driven by the telehealth provider. Sometimes it's just a sore throat or something like that, and they can treat them and not need them to be seen in follow-up. You got a patient with 5 chronic conditions, they're going to be seen in follow-up. So at Nevada Health Centers, we check a patient in, provider sees them, we check a patient out virtually, check in, check out virtual, and we'll schedule them right then, follow-up in person. So that's how we manage that.
Do you track that at all for the patients that exceed your ability to treat them and say, no, you've got to be referred, you've got to go to a hospital, you've got to go to an urgent care? Do you track that at all as to what percentage of your patients aren't getting their problems solved through telehealth? I would bet that a majority of them do get their issues solved, but I would say there's a certain percentage of them that have more serious anomalies that need more acute attention in person.
Corey Nieto for the record. I'll be honest with you, that's the follow-up, like the disposition of whether it's a PCP or an ER or a UC or not. We don't have the ability to track that, but it's something we've talked about. Living in the department where we check in for all the providers in the organization, I hear about it, and I don't hear of many. I can say that, but do I have an exact number for you? No.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, in full retrospect, I mean, you can track some of that through the HCAPs or CAP scores that are collected on patients, because if the patient reports some level of dissatisfaction with the level of service that they received, I mean, that's a pretty good indicator as to whether or not the service that they were provided met their needs. So, okay, I think we're pretty much good for now. I mean, I know in general we have to have future conversations as to the expansion of telehealth in terms of licensure. I mean, philosophical difference that a conversation will be needed to have at some point. That's obviously not in this bill, but we'll have to discuss that in the near term. Let's go ahead and move on to support testimony. So if anyone would like to provide testimony and support, please proceed forward.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the committee. I'm Nancy Bowen, the CEO for the Nevada Primary Care Association. We represent the state's community health centers, and I'd like to thank Corey for her great presentation. That was a wonderful discussion on telehealth. Our members serve the most vulnerable Nevadans. 91% of their patients have incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level. Telehealth is very important to our patients, as you've just heard, saving them time on public transportation and time away from work and their families. In 2021, our health centers in the state provided nearly 113,000 virtual visits, about 28% of their total visits for that year. It is critical that the state continue to reimburse for these services so our patients do not lose the effective and convenient way to access health care. We support this bill.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the committee. Joan Hall, representing Nevada Rural Hospital Partners, Nevada's 13 critical access hospitals and their affiliated 17 RHCs, also safety net providers, as are the FQHCs. While utilization from our rural hospitals and clinics has never been as robust as was anticipated when we passed these laws in 2015, and the issue for that is a lot of things beyond our control: bandwidth, providers who want to provide this, and patients, as Corey talked about, being able to utilize the smart devices. It's still vital to the care provided in rural Nevada. We use it in ER, acute, and in some ICU settings, as well as in primary care. During COVID, especially, we saw the benefit when the rules were changed so that our RHCs could be that distant site, because before that, the providers in our rural clinics could not be considered a distant site. So that was very helpful during COVID, as was the telephone only for behavioral health patients. That was really pretty vital. We're supportive of this. And Dr. Titus, the question you had asked, are all of our physicians Nevada-based? They are not. They are all Nevada licensed per law, but we found many specialists who don't provide specialty care via telehealth that we need, that are based out of the state, licensed in Nevada, but based out of state. So we support this and urge your passage. Thank you.
My name is George Ross. I'm representing HCA, which is Sunrise Children's, Southern Hills, and Mountain View Hospitals. HCA supports SB 119. We believe it will maintain and increase access to care, maintain and increase quality of care, and in particular, the certainty of future coverage will encourage future investment. Thank you.
Good evening, Alex Tanchik on behalf of two clients tonight, the Nevada Advanced Practice Nurses Association, as well as Vitality Unlimited, which is a certified community behavioral health center with locations in Elko, Dayton, Carson City, and Reno. NEPNA's Vice President, Dr. Cameron Duncan, and Vitality Unlimited CEO Esther Quilici have both submitted letters of support of this measure. So I'll just sum up by saying SB 119 will allow providers the necessary support to provide care to patients while helping patients across the state access the care they need. Thank you.
Chair Dunyate, members of the committee, Isaac Tenorio with Strategy 360, today representing Magellan Health. Telehealth absolutely helps in addressing mental health and behavioral health services in the state. We urge your support, and we also believe that it should be continued to be reimbursed. Thank you so much for your time.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Katie Ryan with Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican, ditto.
If you can use the mic. There you go.
Yeah, it helps when you press the button. Barry Cole, Barrycole. I want to remind all of us, if you haven't gone to medical school, that 95% of the diagnosis comes from the interview, taking the history. 5% comes from actually doing the physical examination to figure out if what you were thinking might be right, because now you test the hypothesis. I say that because in psychiatry, we really put our stock on the clinical interview we do. The only time I do a physical examination is if I've hospitalized the patient and the service doesn't come with a PA or a NP or another physician who will do the physical exam, then I will do it. Usually psychiatrists are not performing their own physical examinations, which is why I think you've seen an amendment that's been proposed that perhaps on an annual basis everybody be referred out to at least have a physical examination. I've worked for both a large hospital system in Northern and Central California. I've worked for a mental health center over in Central California. And what I found consistently was that the visual component rarely worked consistently. That was always the Achilles heel. Even in hospital systems, somebody forgot to plug in and recharge the battery to the camera system, but I could talk with the patient. The other thing that I encountered was that when I needed to use translation, I would have to turn off the audio of the audio-visual system, now rely on the translation that came from my cell phone. So I'm just watching somebody while I'm talking with them through the telephone anyway. I don't see that this is going to be a threat to private practitioners with bricks and mortar offices, and I would like to actually say I believe in this so much. I receive telemedicine services from my endocrinologist. That's why I'm here every day, but I'm seeing my endocrinologist in Reno via tele. So thanks, it does work even for old guys like me.
Patrick Kelly, Nevada Hospital Association. One of the good things that came out of the pandemic, and there were only a few, was the widespread adoption of telehealth. We shouldn't lose that momentum. It's a very important key to access to health care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in support? Anyone in Las Vegas? And anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in support of SB 119, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Anna Binder for the record again. Listening in, I cannot tell you how much telehealth has saved our family. We're a family of 8 with children that have multiple, medical needs as well as myself. And telehealth has allowed me to tend to more time with my kids. For example, about a week ago, we used telehealth when I had 3 sick kids from the comfort of our couch instead of hauling up and spending half a day over at the pediatrician's office. I also receive long-term pain management as well as psychological sessions. And most of my providers that I've seen for a long time, they do require in-person visits, and one's like 3 months and one's, once every 6 months. So I think a lot of the practices have policies in place already for that, but telehealth is invaluable, I know, for us. And then as well as the rural internet connectivity and access to telehealth has been the biggest topics in a lot of the council meetings since the pandemic. So thank you guys again. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. My name's Kim Palchikoff, and I'm calling in from Reno. I am one of tens of thousands of Nevadans who rely on telehealth and my landline telephone to speak to my doctors. All of them I use, for the most part, I use telehealth thanks to COVID and thanks to the fact that it's now possible to do so. And I don't have to drive to their offices because I don't drive, I'm disabled. But I want to point out one thing. You can debate forever what are the benefits and drawbacks of telehealth. And while there's many things that telehealth can't do and it can't address, there's many, many things like Dr. Cole just pointed out that it can. And I think COVID taught us that. Real quickly, my internet and cell phone coverage is spotty at best, which is why I have a landline for audio-only calls. There were times when my video calls on my cell phone to my doctors dropped at least 3 or 4 times in a matter of 5 minutes. Switching to AT&T did not help. There's been other times I'm running around outside in the bathrobe in the rain with my phone up in the air trying to find a bar so that I could talk to my doctor. But my main concern for this bill is that there's going to be a big change to the health care of many of Nevada's senior citizens who are relying on landlines for their medical care. A lot of them either don't like technology or they can't afford the $100 for a cell phone and internet service, and so they really do rely on those landline phones like I do. My landline phone costs me $15 a month. My doctors are all, by the way, watching this bill very, very carefully, as am I, because if the parity situation goes away and they don't get paid equally as for a phone conversation, as they would if I walked in the door, they're going to lose a patient and I'm going to lose a doctor. So I hope you can consider the senior citizens. And again, I know telehealth isn't the be-all, end-all, but it's certainly it's a lot better than nothing for many people who otherwise may have nothing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. This is Catherine Nielsen. Again, I am testifying on my own personal behalf. I'll make it quick. My husband has severe epilepsy and had a major brain surgery in August of last year, and he received a lot of his telehealth services as far as Minnesota because, unfortunately, there is no epileptologist available in the state of Nevada that can assist him with his care. So telehealth is vital in keeping him alive. But our 9-year-old daughter has very, very newly diagnosed type 1 diabetes, And telehealth is vital for her treatment as well. Some days telehealth really keeps us from being back in the hospital because we're able to connect with her doctors to make the necessary adjustments to her insulin regimen, because you can quickly go from being perfectly okay and being back into diabetic ketoacidosis in the blink of an eye. So telehealth really keeps two very, very, very important members of my family alive. And then I myself receive telehealth services with the Lou Ruvo Center in Las Vegas. So it allows me to be here in Carson City with my family. So thank you so much. Please consider passing this bill.
Chair, there are no additional callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's go to opposition. Anyone in opposition to this bill, please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Helen Foley, here on behalf of the Nevada Association of Health Insurance Plans, a statewide trade association representing 10 member companies providing commercial health insurance and government programs to Nevadans. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on SB 119 in opposition. While we are opposed to certain provisions of this bill, I do want to highlight that we support the use of telehealth to ensure individuals receive care when, where, and how they need it. A telehealth visit is often used to access less complicated care, meaning less than an urgent care visit. If the telehealth visit determines that additional care is needed, then a member still would be required to see a provider in his or her office. Telehealth plays a key role in supporting health care access, of which we witnessed in response to COVID-19, and should continue to serve as an important tool to drive access and affordability for Nevadans following the public health emergency. We do, however, have concerns with mandated reimbursement parity because it would eliminate the ability of insurers and providers to enter into agreements that promote high-quality, value-based care. NVAHP supports patients receiving the services in the modality best fit for them, so long as the regular environment and reimbursement appropriately recognize the quality and cost differences of the services. While it is evident that the members experience a high level of quality care, experience and improved health outcomes in using telehealth for certain services and specialties, there is still not enough quality or safety data to suggest that all telehealth encounters are alike. Mandated reimbursement parity does not take into account the following. Rates are developed in part to cover the overhead costs of providing services, such as a provider's office equipment and the site of service. Providers are often able to see more patients virtually than they would be able to accommodate during the same amount of time in an in-person setting. Reimbursement parity would create an uneven playing field for the provider who chose only to offer services virtually. Reimbursement parity requirements can also drive up a member's cost share if the cost of the telehealth visit is required to be the same as the in-person visit. When providers and payers are able to negotiate and enter into innovative value-based arrangements, that incentivizes virtual care. Providers may be better able to manage care at lower costs to consumers. Providers and payers should be able to negotiate reimbursement for services delivered virtually. As care delivery quickly evolves and consumers get used to engaging in virtual care, the market is able to offer new and innovative value-based payment models that do not tie rates to an antiquated fee-for-service system. Health insurers should have the flexibility to compensate providers based on actual costs, especially for telehealth providers that do not maintain offices. While we oppose mandated reimbursement parity, we do appreciate that the bill would allow lower reimbursement for audio services. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer the questions that you asked me earlier.
So thank you, Ms. Foley. So the only question that I have is, what is the feedback from the organization that you represent to align this bill towards what CMS has made permanently? Is there any pushback on that? I mean,
I quickly polled some of our members today. I wasn't able to reach all 10. There was great interest in that. They felt that was a fair system that CMS has come out with. You see how complicated different states are grappling with this issue, and even with CMS, how extensive. They've added 54 different codes in 3 categories on a telehealth list. So it's not an easy thing, but we do not like just continuing on as if we were still in COVID mode.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much. And one thing that I want to say is, and I also represent an FQHC, they have their services permanently, and those will not go away. You know, one of the things we really want to make sure is that we have mental health, that the rural areas are taken care of, that we understand the problems with rural areas and connectivity and broadband. So we want to work very closely with you to find a good solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in opposition? Anyone in Las Vegas? And anyone virtually?
Chair, there are no callers for testimony at this time.
And last but not least, let's go to neutral. Anyone in neutral?
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Leah Case, Leacase, here tonight on behalf of the Nevada Psychiatric Association at the direction of policy staff and the amazing legislative assistant for the chair, testifying in neutral, although we do support the bill as is, to advocate for expanding this to include the audio-only telehealth parity component. We did submit an amendment that is on the record that just asked to do that. I did not include any conceptual language in that because the bill makes changes to the Nevada revised statutes and eliminates a sunset, and I'm not a lawyer and have no idea how to do that. So thank you for your fabulous legal staff. I do want to add that telehealth pay parity is imperative for our providers. You know, there are many professions, like the lawyers in this room, who get to bill by the quarter hour regardless of means of communication. That should be extended to these same providers who practice their skill via audio only or telemedicine. You know, you've worked really hard to get to this point in your career where you can practice medicine. You are licensed in the state of Nevada, and you should be fairly compensated for that, and that includes pay parity no matter the means of communication. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in neutral? We don't have anyone else here. Anyone in Las Vegas? Anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 119, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. That concludes. Did you have any closing comments, Ms. Gano? Nope. All right. That concludes this presentation, so we'll go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 119. Let's move on to our last agenda item, which is we're going to open a hearing on Senate Bill 298. With us today, we have Senator Scheibel. I will say we do have Scheibel Day next week, so that should be pretty fun. But please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much. This is a great warm-up for Scheibel Day coming up on Tuesday. And this bill is actually from one of the interim committees. Sorry, for the record, my name is Melanie Scheibel. I'm the state senator from District 9, and Senate Bill 298 that I'm presenting to you today came out of the one of the interim committees. It was a recommendation made to the Legislative Committee on Senior Citizens, Veterans, and Adults with Special Needs during the 2021 to 2022 interim. And according to a presentation to the committee on June 28th of 2022, there are 7,610 residents in licensed residential facilities for groups and assisted living facilities in Nevada. Federal regulations require that states must include in written agreements for each of these residents that the document provides protections that address eviction processes and appeals comparable to those provided under a jurisdiction's landlord-tenant law. Currently, Nevada law does not offer these eviction protections for individuals in residential facilities for groups. As things currently stand, when an eviction takes place, it is often initiated because of behavioral challenges or financial issues on the part of the resident. Residents in lower levels of care, such as residential facilities for groups or assisted living facilities, do not have protections from evictions by providers regardless of the payer source. A formal discharge process with appeal rights does not exist for these individuals, and they are often evicted to homeless shelters or hospitals where they are often not able to receive the appropriate level of care. Senate Bill 298 would make changes to Chapter 449A, the Care and Rights of Patients of NRS, to bring the state of Nevada into compliance with the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, rule setting, which provides the increased protections for individuals living in non-skilled nursing settings. The bill proposes to establish a baseline of eviction protections for all individuals in residential facilities for group residents that mirrors federal regulations and would be in compliance with the requirements of CMS's settings rule. It would also incorporate a notification process to alert the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, ADSD, DHHS, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, which is part of ADSD, which is part of DHHS, within 30 days of a proposed eviction, and provide penalties for facilities that do not follow the process with enforcement mechanisms. Additionally, SB 298 would designate a forum to adjudicate eviction disputes. I'll walk through the bill with you briefly, if that would be helpful. Excellent. Sections 2 through 7 provide definitions for the terms that are related to residential facilities for groups. Section 8 prohibits a provider from acting as a representative of a resident in the process of an involuntary discharge unless that provider is a relative. Section 9 outlines the specific information and details that need to be included in the contract between the resident and the provider. And Section 10 requires a provider to give additional notice before involuntarily discharging a resident for failure to pay contracted charges and attempt to first resolve any issues that may result in the involuntary discharge of a resident before the eviction. The section also provides exceptions for when an involuntary discharge is allowed, such as 1, a resident's health has improved to the point where they no longer need services of a residential facility for groups. 2, the health or safety of any person in the facility is endangered. Or 3, after sufficient notice has been provided, the resident has failed to pay for contracted charges. 4, the services provided by the residential facility for groups are no longer adequate to meet the needs of the resident. And 5, the residential facility for groups is no longer in operation. Section 11 provides the required contents of a written notice of intent to discharge a resident. And Section 12 of the bill requires a residential facility for groups to provide certain assistance in the discharge and relocation of a resident, and also requires the provider to make sure a representative of the resident is involved in the planning for the discharge, except, of course, in emergency situations. This section, Section 12, also requires that emergency placement situations must be temporary. Section 13 allows a residential facility for groups to request the Department of Administration to make a determination for an immediate transfer or discharge of a resident in an emergency. This section requires the department to order a transfer or discharge if allowing the resident to remain at the facility would endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the resident or other residents. The department would also be required to hold a hearing no later than 7 days after issuing an order. Section 16, we'll come back, but Section 16 provides that an advance notice of an emergency order by the department is not required. Back to Section 14, that authorizes a resident or their representative to request a hearing before the Hearings Division of the Department of Administration before an involuntary discharge takes place. Sections 14 and 17 provide for the confidentiality of that hearing. Sections 1 and 19 authorize the disciplinary action against a residential facility for groups that violates the provisions of Sections 4 through 14. And Section 18 authorizes the state long-term care ombudsman to offer assistance to a facility, a resident, and their representative in planning for the discharge and relocation of the resident from the facility. And I'd like to give my co-presenter an opportunity to introduce herself before we take any questions.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Marie Coe. I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman within Aging and Disability Services, and my office has the privilege of advocating for residents in these residential facilities for groups.
Thank you so much. Any questions from any of the committee members at this time? Senator Titus.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm so glad you're at the table because when I was looking at this bill, one of the things I was concerned about was Section 11D, which is contacting the state ombudsman, because I will tell you, having all the time I've spent in a long-term care, there's not enough of you, and just wondering how this will spread you out through your agency, because we can't get you frequently when we need you for, or I won't say we, meaning me, but patients' families, when they have concerns and needs, takes so long to have that help reach out, be able to reach out. And so I know we've expanded your capacity somewhat and more positions, but I'm wondering about your vacancy rate and what's this bill really going to do to your ability to respond?
Thank you, Senator Titus. Marie Coe, for the record, long-term care ombudsman. May I co-direct? Thank you. We actually support this bill for the residents to have these protections. Currently, we have seen in the last year a 38% increase in complaints in these settings regarding discharges. When the staff, the ombudsman, go to advocate for residents, there is not a lot that we can do other than to try to help them find another place. But if somebody has been discharged from these settings to a homeless shelter, to a hospital, they don't have the right to return currently from a hospital if their acute needs have been met. And if they have care needs and they're going to a homeless shelter or to another setting, their care needs cannot be met. So we would encourage and be able to advocate for them in these appeal settings, where they'll have the opportunity to say that they still continue to have care needs and they need to remain in a setting. If it is a payment issue, that we can help advocate for that and get the provider the payment source because they deserve that. So we do not have enough of us, but with this process, it will help residents, which is what our goal is, and we would have the method to do that. The other part that I will say is they'll have the ability to have legal representation through this setting as well. So right now, if a resident contacts us and disagrees with a discharge, we can contact legal services, but there's nothing to support that process in a legal defense. So this would also give them an opportunity for that.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. So does it expand what your role is? Because technically you're long-term care ombudsman, and this now is a resident facility, not necessarily long-term care at all. These are residential housing facilities. So do we need a change in definition then?
Thank you for the question, Senator Titus. Marie Coe, for the record. We cover the advocacy in these settings. It is within our jurisdiction to go, and we currently go and meet with all the residents in these settings.
Excellent, thank you. That was the questions I had on this bill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to support testimony at this time. Anyone?
And Chair, I
Yep.
do have another meeting. Will you excuse me?
You are good.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone in support testimony, please come forward.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you. Jonathan Norman, NORMAN, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. We represent a lot of people under guardianship now. And we see, and in talking with ADSD, this problem happening quite frequently. And when I say frequently, I mean the consequences of this type of completely non-judicial eviction is extremely harsh for people who find themselves in need of a level of care that is not available, and we have them being discharged to homeless shelters with medical needs, and it creates tragic circumstances. So I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Las Vegas, virtually.
If you would like to testify in support of SB 298, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Aaron Brooks. That's ERINROOK. I live in Senate District 3, and I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 298. People living in residential facilities for groups have a right to eviction protection.
I'm sorry. Can you speak louder to the speaker, please?
Sure, sorry, one sec. Saying that, for the record, my name is Aaron Rook, E-R-I-N-R-O-O-K. I live in Senate District 3. I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 298. People living in residential facilities for groups have a right to eviction protections that are comparable to those provided under state landlord-tenant laws. If anything, sorry about the dogs. If anything, people who are more vulnerable due to mobility, cognitive, or financial limitations should receive even to a greater degree of protection. While there are obviously scenarios in which such facilities may no longer be able to care for particular residents, this bill has ample exemptions to address these concerns. We owe it to those living in group facilities as well as the loved ones trusting these places with their care to ensure that they will not be discharged in a way that puts them at risk or violates their rights. Provide appropriate recourse should the violation occur. I urge you to support Senate Bill 298 and ensure that vulnerable Nevadans are never left in the lurch. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Letitia Metherell. I'm a resident of Douglas County, and I just want to say I am in full support of this bill. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Anyone in opposition to this bill, please proceed forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Brett Salmon with the Nevada Healthcare Association. We represent both the residential facilities for groups or the assisted living communities and the nursing facilities throughout the state. Obviously, this bill just deals with the residential facilities for groups. We appreciate the opportunity to comment on Senate Bill 298 and have several concerns, and we've expressed in the letter that you all should have that we submitted to your staff. We value the residents and family members that we serve in our assisted living communities. We serve thousands of residents every day, and we're very grateful to provide places to accommodate their needs as they age in place. Unfortunately, there are times when a resident must be transferred from the current community because the care needs exceed the license. And some cases where a resident or family no longer have adequate financial resources and the community does not have a Medicaid contract that would allow that resident specifically to stay in that particular building. I'm just going to highlight one area from the letter that I provided the committee. The bill grants hearing rights in every single case of a transfer and discharge. This is the item that created the fiscal note that you'll see in the committee documents. In the bill, hearings would be handled at the Hearings Division at the Department of Administration. The most recent data that I found from the Hearings Division fiscal year 2022 report explains that only 33.6% of all cases are resolved at the hearing officer level in less than 90 days. And so that obviously caused us pause because that means 60% of those cases take longer than 90 days for resolution. And so we're very concerned about the potential delays in a hearing process that already seems very overwhelmed, even with the additional staff that would be added per the fiscal note. A delayed hearings process is obviously not healthy for a resident who needs to be transferred to a higher level because of health concerns that we have for them. And if they have to wait for 4 to 6 months to go through a process, they're not in the best place they should be. And then on the other side, it's not financially healthy for an assisted living community to have to carry an appeal process for 4 to 6 to 8 months as well. And just as an aside, Senator Scheibel mentioned the CMS settings rule and the mandate on assisted living. That only is a mandate for those assisted living facilities that accept Medicaid. Many facilities in Nevada, because of the lower Medicaid rates, don't accept Medicaid. And so I just wanted to put that on the record and clarify that does apply for those that accept Medicaid. Those that don't, it doesn't apply. So thank you for your time.
Can I ask a quick question, really quick? I know, I'm sorry, it's already 6 o'clock in the evening. There's obviously different portions of the bill in terms of the written notice. What's the biggest pushback that you guys have, like, in general with the bill? What is the greatest concern? I think that's probably most important, just for clarity, because I know the letter structure is different sections of the bill, but which one is the one that probably is the greatest of concern?
I would, Brett Salmon for the record, I would say, Senator, that, well, there's sort of two areas. It's all the additional things added to the admission agreement that we think could be handled in a different way. And I discussed that with Aging and Disabled Services earlier this week. I tried to get a meeting with Senator Scheibel, but couldn't, so I met with them. And so I discussed a lot of those with them. And then on the hearings process, there needs to be some definite timelines put in there. You know, I don't think the hearing process is as much as the problem that we have. It's the timelines that aren't there. And if there's no date certain, then it's not good for the resident on the health, and it's not good for the facility on the financial side if that's the issue for the discharge.
And so just to go a little bit further into it, because I think this is important for my understanding, in terms of the section of the written notice, et cetera, is there any pushback on just even providing the resident or their family members a written notice, or it's more so on the timeline of processes?
Brett Salmon, for the record, we already provide a written notice. I mean, we already work with the Ombudsman, we already work with Adult Protective Services. There's already a extensive process in place. The hearing process would be the newest part of the process.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please proceed.
All right, good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Laura Higman. I represent Mission Senior Living as the Director of Quality Assurance. I'm also a current licensed administrator in Nevada for residential group facilities. I've been in the senior living industry since 2011, and I do want to state that I have a passion for supporting residents and quality care. I'm here today to voice my opposition on portions of the bill, SB 298. By prohibiting the involuntary discharge or transfer of a resident, except for the reasons listed on the bill, would remove my ability as an operator to uphold and enforce the complete extent of the signed rental agreement, topics that may not fall within the categories of the proposed bill. A small example of that may be discrimination. In NRS, we currently have to uphold non-discrimination within our community. But I cannot support that culture if I have a resident who makes discriminatory statements towards staff and other residents. After multiple discussions, if I cannot act on those type of situations that go against our rental agreement, then I have no choice but to continue that behavior inside of my community. In addition, prohibiting the involuntary discharge of a resident after emergency placement leaves the possibility of a resident to return to a facility where care and services cannot be met. And finally, the proposed bill states that the Department of Administration will have the ability to transfer a resident if deemed necessary. However, there are no fundamental resources to transfer to. In this market, it would be another privately owned facility that must be willing and able to accept, for example, a non-paying resident. Let me conclude by stating that my organization and I operate ethically to the best of our ability. And if we are in the chance of having to do an involuntary discharge, we include APS and the Ombudsman, and we are very appreciative of their services. But placing barriers on the diverse situations we are faced with forces the facilities to make decisions made outside of what is in best interest of the business and the residents we serve. And that is all I have today, so thank you for your time.
My name is Jeannie Bishop Parise, Jeanne, Bishop, B-I-S-H-O-P hyphen Parise, P-A-R-I-S-E. I retired a year ago. I am currently HSE number 3 for the state of Nevada, and I was originally licensed in 1984 as license number 156 for the state of Nevada, signed by license number 2 and number 4. Existing law and practice for RFFGs provides for the majority of the proposed additions in the blue ink. Adoption would create confusion. If you look at 449.268 rights of residence, procedure for filing grievance, complaint, or report of incident, investigation and response, NAC 449.2702, written policy on admissions, eligibility for residency, NAC 449.2704, and on and on. This is the codes that we are governed by within the RFFGs. So it has been the Ombudsman always that has historically referred the resident to aging and disability advocacy services, as well as resources for financial aid, legal aid, or mental health services. She is the one, or he is the one, that we've been required to give written notice to of intent to discharge. And then we have certain parameters for that. And Section 14, which we're talking about with the hearing process being unduly burdensome. The problem with that is that those hearings would involve a fiscal note, they would involve human resources, which we're lacking in the state and in the ombudsman program, and there would be no outcome that would be changed by it, because within existing rules and within the proposed rules, when there's a failure to pay, involuntary discharge can take place. So I really want to talk about the elephant in the room that has far too long been the problem in Nevada since I was an administrator in 1984, and that is our Medicaid eligibility process and the timeframes for penders to approvals to payment to facilities. Back in the 80s, before spousal impoverishment rules and divided income trusts, the county would give county backup assurance of payment after first review of application. That no longer is in play, but other states have accelerated the approval process where Nevada still lags behind. The cash flow lag from the time of a clean application to time of payment is crippling, and so long-term care facilities accept anything but, since lag time can be upward of a year. I still think a prospective interim payment for 90% of in-house pending Medicaid residents could work with an impressed account established through either taking some leftover ARPA funds or the average annual Medicaid approvals payout to establish. Then it replenishes ongoing as pendings are approved.
If you can wrap up your comments, please.
I will. The divided income trusts are particularly burdensome because those have to route through the AG's office. The proposed human resources that would be used in the hearing process, I think a better use of them would be to work on some of these Medicaid eligibility processes, speeding them up, and then getting the income trusts less burdensome, so that more of our population that we serve. And I'm sure that the ombudsman will verify that the majority of the involuntary discharges that she's talking about are ones that are failure to pay. And it's because of the Medicaid problems.
Thank you so much for your comment. Let's make sure that you put your contact information to the committee secretary so I can contact you after.
I actually have this that I made available to the secretary, and it has further issues with the Medicaid reform that needs to take place.
Thank you. Very appreciated. Thank you so much for your years of service as well.
So, yeah.
Anyone else in opposition? Anyone in Las Vegas and anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 298, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Anyone in neutral on this bill?
Hello again, committee. My name is Joan Hall. I'm representing Nevada Rural Hospital Partners. We don't have a lot of residential care providers in rural Nevada. Most of or half of our hospitals have distinct part long-term care. What you've heard, especially from Jeannie Bishop, are real issues. When these patients, and we're seeing more and more elderly patients that don't have family involvement, don't have perhaps control over their own, finances, or have behavioral health issues. They're in residential care because that's the only place that they can be. And when they become a problem or can't pay in rural areas, we find them in our ER. And maybe they have a medical condition. Once we've taken care of that, there's no place to discharge them to. So we have many hospitals who house these individuals for over a year in a hospital with no payment, and so what Jeannie talked about with the Medicaid issue and that Pender portion, and I think part of it also goes to guardianship. So it is a very multifaceted issue. Those are just my comments.
Dr. Taylor, did you have a question?
I actually have a comment along that I didn't think to ask at the time, and it's relevant, I feel, is that patients, when we were doing long-term care, that we did keep for over a year, foreign nationals. We had a gentleman from Canada that we no payer source. Canada wouldn't, he's a citizen of Canada, we couldn't bill, he may still be there for all I know, but we couldn't do anything about it. It's a real issue.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in neutral? Anyone in Las Vegas, and anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 298, please press *9 to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Nielsen, and I'm making my comments as the Executive Director of the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. I just wanted to state that we are taking a neutral position on today's bill, though I'd like to personally echo the many positive comments stated here today. But to save you guys time and you can get out of here, we're going to submit our longer comments online. Thank you so much.
Chair, there are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and close the hearing, and we'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to testify in public comment at this time? Seeing none in Carson City, anyone in Las Vegas, and anyone virtually?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. That concludes our meeting for today. Welcome everyone to Scheibel Day on Tuesday, and hope everyone has a good evening. The meeting is adjourned.